Okay, we're going to get this meeting of Community Infrastructure Services started. We have 7 consent items. Does someone want to move those? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a change I'd like to request on item number 6.
6 to be, you want to ask questions?
And I want to change the recommendation.
Okay, well, we'll need a vote in order to discuss that. I believe there's going to be another one, so we probably can take them together. Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, I'd like to move that item 7 be brought into discussion. We have some delegates here to present it to us.
Okay, so we'll take it on both, if everyone's okay with that, unless someone wants to object to one. So that's number 6 and 7 to be removed from consent and moved into discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I do want to make one note before we move 1 through 5, that number 4 for Knox Court, we are going to have to deal with it in special council today because the date is June the 4th, and we don't meet again before June the 4th. So we will need 2/3 of the vote after this meeting to convene a special council meeting to deal with that one specifically. So if there's no discussion on 1 through 5, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we will move then to number 6. And Councillor Gazzola, you'd like to change the recommendation?
Yes, this came to us last year and we approved it for a year. And I would like to do the same thing this time, is just to do the approval for 1 year. 3-year approval is too long.
Okay, Mr. Carmichael, you'd like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you through the chair to the committee. I've had discussions with the Ministry of Transportation and their consulting staff on this noise exemption request. And I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify to council what's actually going to happen through this request. This noise exemption is purely for traffic control, for staging of the different phases they're going through the construction. The construction work that occurred within Kitchener has already occurred within the first year of the contract, and there's no actual construction work occurring within the city of Kitchener going forward. So this noise exemption request is purely recognizing that the work is going on the highway, not technically within Kitchener, but the traffic control will have to be conducted to accommodate that night work. And this noise exemption is purely for that traffic work. The noise expectations are expected to be none to minimal. And I would, based on that, recommend that we provide the extension for the full 3 years so we don't have to come back to committee further times with this.
If they're asking for a noise exemption, they expect there could be noise problems. So what is the difficulty in dealing with a year at a time? By 2019, we have a whole new council in place. The whole world could be different. Simply deal with a year at a time.
Okay, Mayor Verbanovic on this item.
Thank you. I'm wondering if staff can comment on why we need to deal with it in the longer term versus the shorter. I mean, is it simply to not have an item on the agenda? I seem to recall there was some concern last year, and I think the province expressed some concern, as I recall, after only the 1 year was granted. Is that correct?
Through the chair, in response, I can't speak specifically to the MTO's reaction. I know they didn't feel that it was necessary to get an annual update on this, but again, that's not their decision. That's council's decision. I'm okay either way. I'm just trying to reduce the time that we have to come back to committee with staff and councillors to deal with the issue when the impact is negligible, if at all.
Have there been any concerns last year?
Not to my knowledge.
With the work that was done? Do you know I think I saw Gloria here. Are you aware if there were any noise complaints? Okay. I mean, I'm fine, to be honest, with going it either way, but I guess I'm also cognizant that, you know, we don't need to create paperwork for the sake of creating paperwork and red tape, and we don't anticipate there's going to be any problems. I mean, we can always revoke a noise exemption, can we not, if there's a problem? So Is there a reason?
Is there, Councillor Gazzola, it's not you don't have the floor. The question's been asked by Mayor Verbanovic. I'll look to staff to answer that question.
Okay, Mr. Carmichael nodded, but perhaps you can answer the question.
Yes,
You're right, Councillor Gazzola. That's why I said he can perhaps answer the question.
through the chair, my apologies. Yes, we do have the ability. We would just have to bring it back to committee and revoke the exemption.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez?
I think that Councillor Gazzola's point is well taken in that there will be a new council. So could we not maybe have it as a 2-year noise exemption? And in that time, then we can have an opportunity to see if there has been any noise concerns expressed by the public, and that will leave us to deal with it before a new council comes in and has to deal with it. Would that be a good happy medium?
Through the chair, frankly, it's your folks' decision. Either any direction we go can work.
Okay, so I'd like to make that amendment then to from April 1st to 2016 to July 31st, 2018.
Okay, we already have an amendment on the floor, so if that one fails, I'll take yours, because it's all the items have been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. The amendment comes from Councillor Gazzola first, and then your amendment would be taken second. Councillor Gazzola, are you looking to speak again?
No, it's not a big issue, but if people are asking for a noise exemption, it means there could be problems. So it's no big issue. You passed 4 of them with the wave of a hand. Adding another one next year is not going to take a lot of our time. I'm not going to get concerned one way or another. I put my case forward. That's it. Forget the amendment and go right to the other one. How's that?
So you're withdrawing your amendment of 2017, and we're moving to the amendment of 2018. Okay. Okay, there's no further questions or discussions, so we will deal with the amendment, which is to change the noise exemption from April 1st, 2016 to July, the period of it from April 1st, 2016 to July 31st, 2018. Those in favor? Those opposed? That carries. So now the motion as amended. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Okay, we're now going to move into item number 7. Mr. Carmichael, did you want to say, there's a few delegations that are coming forward for this one. Did you want to say anything before, or just jump right into the delegations?
Thank you, Chair Galloway, through you to the committee. No, I don't think there's much to say. We have met with the Central Frederick Neighborhood Association people in the past. I just do want to thank them for the homework and the diligent work they've done in preparation for this morning's delegation presentation, and I look forward to working with them going forward.
Okay, thank you. So it's my understanding we have a group of people who are going to come and speak. Mike, Shane, Kate, Laura, and Heather from the Central Frederick Neighborhood Association and Lancaster Neighborhood. You're up first. Is it my understanding there's one of you maybe speaking on behalf of the majority of you?
I'll begin, and then there's a couple of people who have words.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how much time. Are you doing the bulk of the presentation?
I mean, it's going to be less than the 10 minutes
Okay.
that's allocated, yeah.
Okay. So I will give you 10 minutes between all of you to make your presentation. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, Mayor, staff, councillors. We're here to talk about Lancaster Street, which obviously runs right through our neighborhood. It's a major connecting street, and it's very close to 2 future LRT stops, the Market stop and the Frederick stop. So it's a major pedestrian corridor for us, and also for visitors to downtown who park in our neighborhood and walk through the street. There's been a long time effort to improve safety on this street. It was fascinating, actually. Just last night, Laura found a map from 1869, I think, that showed Lancaster marked, 40 years before the mass market automobile. It's incredible that this road has been there so long. And we certainly understand that traffic calming is a thing that has a limited budget, and there's very specific parameters that allow traffic calming projects to move forward. And so part of what we want to do today is reframe the conversation around pedestrian safety, cycling safety, safety for our community. So if we could just get the next slide. So in 1984, there was a child who was struck at Gordon and Lancaster, and that resulted in Gordon being closed off and becoming the cul-de-sac that it is today. And then in 2006, which is many years before my time, there was a CFNA Pedestrian Safety Committee, and then there were further incidents that occurred in 2011 and 2013. And my colleague Heather, who's here, was the citizen who had the van crash through her front yard a couple of years ago. So yes. These are the stats that were supplied by Ken, and we certainly see this is at the Lancaster and Frederick intersection, which is kind of right in the middle of our neighborhood. And I think what's relevant here is not the absolute numbers. I mean, I think in absolute terms, this is kind of like low to medium. But it's the fact that these are collisions that are occurring in a very pedestrian-heavy area. So every collision that happens, every interaction that happens is an opportunity for someone to be hurt. And we see similar stats here. It's a smattering of fender benders. These are police incidents that are reported through the corridor from Krug up to Frederick. And I think it's just a similar thing to keep in mind. We're looking at a very narrow roadway, and these were mentioned in the report that's going to recommend the 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. I think it's easy to see doom and gloom, but I think we're really appreciative of actions that have been taken over the course of the last number of years. The speed limit in the school zone has been reduced, I think, as part of officially a temporary program, but that's very much appreciated. The upgraded crosswalk painting, and then Bethany Church. There was a meeting with them in 2015 that led to them financing and installing a concrete pad that expands the size of the waiting area for students who are waiting to cross the street. These are a few pictures. These were just taken like with people's phones over the past couple days, and then there were additional pictures that were sent by email last night. But you can see, you know, this is at 9 o'clock. There's a lot of cars. The cars pile up at Krug. They pile up at Frederick, and then obviously at Victoria as well. And so it's big columns of cars that come through. And, you know, often we do find that our crossing guard has to jump into traffic and wave her sign to achieve a safe crossing for people. So we're looking here also at bicycles, and then here's an incident. There's actually a cyclist in a red shirt there, and this red car is having to weave around them to get by. So this is also a concern. There's a general impatience. Because the road is so narrow, it's difficult to safely pass. And you know, it's kind of a grim reminder when you walk along and see a sign or a post that's clearly taken a beating. So I think this is the core of our struggle here, is that you know, we have a 500-meter chunk where there's nowhere, you know, where there's nowhere for a pedestrian to cross. There's nowhere where the cars are expected to stop. And I think a lot of this is driven by you know, the fire trucks and other things. But I think this helps maybe understand that, and this is not typical of this neighborhood. If you look on Frederick, you know, at Frederick and Lancaster, there's a light, and then 150 meters to the west, there's another light at Otto. So clearly there's an acceptance of having more frequent traffic control measures. We just don't have them on this particular stretch. And this is, I think, a long part of the conversation. This is another kind of our piece of our struggle, is that because Lancaster is designated as a major collector, we're not, you know, it meets the traffic volume guidelines of a major collector. But it appears that it's primarily designated that because of its volumes. And so it may well be that there's a long-term effort, you know, at some point to work on a reclassification of this street. But that's not really what we're asking for today. I think we just want to sort of set that expectation, possibly for someday in the future. And in the short term, we're looking for measures to make it safer as a major collector rather than as a residential street. I think it is relevant, though, if you look at this image. This is Krug Street that's around the corner. You see a wide roadway with a parking lane. You see wide boulevard strips and poles and trees and stuff. And, if you compare this to Lancaster, here it is. It's one traffic lane in each direction with the sidewalks right beside it. And so it's very clear, from these images that, and the fact that Lancaster was built in the 19th century, that it was never intended for the use that it has today.
So we're here today with a few, we're not just here to tell you about how we feel or the lack of safety that we feel when we walk. We're actually here with a few solutions, and I know you guys want to hear the solutions that we've come up with. Our big ask today is, as Mike pointed out, the 500-meter and 500-meter. We're teaching our children that it is safe to cross at Chapel and Lancaster Street. That's where there's a crossing guard for about 20 minutes a day, but there's children who arrive at 9:01. So we've all been late once or twice. There's children that arrive at 9:01, and their options are to jaywalk, to cross by themselves, to cross at 5 points at Krug and Weber, which is, I think there's no staff that would expect a child to cross there. And then the other option would be for the children to cross at Frederick Street in Lancaster, which, as you all know in the news, about 2 weeks ago, a child was struck. So these are our options, and this is what we're looking for. One of the things that we're trying to do as a neighborhood is to remind people that this is a neighborhood, it's a heritage neighborhood, and I know the city has other expectations for it, but when it comes down to it, the safety that people feel when they walk on our sidewalks is how we feel engaged to our city. If we can't make people feel safe in an urban neighborhood, then we've got to redirect our thinking. And one of the ways that we like to do it is by getting creative. So we would like to make the crossing safer. We're here to ask for pedestrian activated lights at Chapel and Lancaster. They won't be going off all the time, but they will be integral in keeping children safe and making parents feel like this is our neighborhood. And the other things that we'd like to do are we're looking for creative solutions. We have talked to Ken and Barry about possibly using our artistic skills, as Central Frederick is known, to paint the intersection at Chapel and Lancaster, or the crosswalk at Chapel and Lancaster. We have proposed that the CFNA create and pay for low-lying planters so that when people drive along Lancaster Street, they're reminded that they're in fact driving this far from people's front porches. It's really quite a tight squeeze. There's nowhere for people to weave. There's no way that people can brake quickly. It just causes every spring we find a bunch of car mirrors that have been clipped off each other because they just don't have the room to pass. So we're here today to ask for some creative thinking so that the city can get what they want. We understand that this is what it is, but we have creativity, we have ambition, and we're here to help. So thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Joanne Davis as well. Kelly, is Joanne speaking on her own?
Yes, I have her as a separate delegation, not next, but after that. So,
very quickly, this is Kate Dewitt.
Okay. Hi. I'm probably the least prepared of the speakers from our group, but I just would like to say I live on Lancaster Street near Mansion, and my daughter in the black and white and pink, and my son and I, and my husband, we all bike a lot. And consistently, the most dangerous part of any bike ride that we go on is turning into my own driveway. Because if we're coming from the north, we need to turn left. I'll be standing there with my arm out signaling, and cars will try to pass me, and we're out of time. And cars will try to pass me on my left as I'm going into my driveway. And walking down the street is 50 kilometers an hour feels very, very fast when it's going right past, this far away from you. And just from my personal experience, I'd really like to support the 40 kilometer an hour speed limit that will be voted on today.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the first delegation. Just so you know, next we'll have Angela and then we'll have Joanne. But before we do that, there may be some questions for this group of delegations. Councillor Marsh?
I just want to say thank you very much for coming in and bringing your presentation forward. And I just want to ask the photos that, if you can come forward, Mike, the photos that you said had been snapped over the last week or so at school times showed some heavy traffic volumes. Can you speak to the traffic volumes outside of the school zone, the school drop-off and pickup times?
Are you referring to the traffic that has augmented since, say, 2013, when Weber Street and the Margaret Avenue Bridge were both closed simultaneously, and most of the city found out they needed to take Lancaster Street in order to cross from Victoria to the other side of downtown. Mm-hmm. So every morning I walk with my children down Lancaster Street. We have a walking bus, so I pick up several families worth of children and we walk share. So that means that I walk sometimes up to 6 or 7 children to school. One of them is my youngest daughter there. She's 4.5. And often we have to walk single file. One of the most effective ways that I found in calming traffic is when I hear a car coming quite aggressively behind me, I stick my arm out like this, and I can hear them actually slow down. I'm a short woman, my arms are short, and I'm on the sidewalk. I'm on my toes right now, just so you know. And the idea that something as simple as me doing that would make a motorist slow down and rethink their actions means that they're very, very close to that little girl.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So at the appropriate time, I'll have maybe after the delegations, I'll have a motion to bring forward.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez? There's more questions.
Yeah, don't go yet. Thanks also for coming in and raising this issue, because it is everywhere, but certainly Lancaster, the pictures that you showed us, I mean, some of our problems are on wider streets. Laura, that was a great example of when you put your arm out. Councillor Marsh asked about the volumes. You talked about the volumes during the time when Margaret Avenue Bridge was closed and Weber was closed. The volumes are consistently like that all day long, or specifically around school times, at home times, not just school at home times, but at home into the evening times?
Well, there's certainly, I guess my point of mentioning that, the 2013, is that the volumes haven't decreased the way that the city assumed. Now the Margaret Avenue Bridge is open, or Weber Street is open. And Weber Street, I know that we're all very excited about it as being an artery, but what happened was, I'm not sure if you've driven down Lancaster Street, the area of Lancaster Street that we're talking about. There's only one traffic light in that period. There's only one opportunity for making it necessary for motorists to slow down even. So people, as soon as they found out that there's this long, narrow, straight roadway, they used it. And why would they bother going to the safer artery when they have this little thing that they think that they can drive quite quickly down? The traffic is very, very heavy during commuting times, but it's there, and it's there throughout the day, and then it's much worse at night.
Can I just, and when it's not heavy, it's very fast. That's been my observation, is that when it's very heavy, usually cars will sort of stay behind me if I'm on my bike. Sometimes they honk, but they'll generally stay behind me when it's quite heavy because they can't pass. But when there's just a single car, they just go extremely fast. And that was also consistent with the findings of our informal traffic study that we did in September, where we found that predominantly cars are staying below the speed limit, but then there'll be a car that's going 70 or 80 kilometers an hour. And they're so close to each other as well, that if cars are actually coming toward each other, then
So did you find that the 40 kilometer speed limit around the school did slow people down? Or did you get enough enforcement around that? Because that's one of the concerns that we've heard before, that just lowering the speed limit without the enforcement isn't always enough to reduce the speed, because people perceive, well, it says 40, but it's outside the school time, so maybe I can still do 50.
Oh, I guess I'm going to be the one to speak to that because.
Well, yeah, you were. I
Yeah.
think you were more involved with the analysis in that study.
So,
Do you understand?
sure. I kind of forget the first part of your
I'm
question.
sorry.
but
Did you find that the 40 kilometer speed reduction around the school actually did slow people down?
I think that we feel it did because, again, one of the things about Lancaster Street that we're trying to drive home is that 40, well, and if you say if people see a 40 sign that they feel that they can go 45, well, if people see a 50 sign, they feel that they can drive even faster than that. So what we're looking for is also a way to communicate with people that this street is different. Being on a 50 zone, you assume that it's a faster street, but when you make a street a 40, we can repeatedly remind our own neighbors, as well as other people who are cutting through, that this is a neighborhood and that this street is different.
Okay, thank you very much.
I mean, we could even possibly make it what is it that Westmount is, where the speed limits are increased because it's a community safety zone. That would be even great as a next step in the future.
Mayor Verbanovic?
Thank you, and thank you to the group of you for coming in and for all that the neighborhood does, including this past weekend and the porch party. I mean, it was certainly well received, and you clearly have got your groove on still. So, in fact, if you maybe were out on the street doing that, that might help from traffic calming too. But in all sincerity, I mean, this is this is this is an issue that I know has been raised for many times over many years, and I really want to applaud your creativity in terms of some of the solutions you've brought forward in working with Councillor Marsh and so on. You've suggested that I may be sort of overstepping here in terms of suggesting it, but you've suggested that the association might be willing to sort of contribute towards some of these solutions. Have you looked at whether or not you might be able to access the community matching funds? I mean, A, have you looked into it? And B, if you haven't, maybe it's something that we can ask staff to comment on if you might be eligible for it.
I love your optimism. That's amazing. No, we haven't looked into allocating funding because, as you'll hear from Joanne, this is a conversation that's been happening for decades.
Right.
When you guys all give us a big thumbs up later today, we'll definitely look into our options. We're a creative, motivated group, so we will get the funding. But right now, we just need a green light for you guys. So.
Okay, and then I guess the other piece I was going to ask about, and maybe more just a question of terminology, because you referenced pedestrian-activated traffic signals, which I think is different than what Councillor Marsh is talking about, which is these new pedestrian-activated crosswalks, which is sort of a new version of the old crosswalks, as I understand it. Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Councillor Marsh is more knowledgeable about the actual terminology.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to double check on that. So, wonderful.
There's been some confusion, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it has been confusing because there's sort of like the old style that used to be at King and Scott. Then there's the new ones, which are actually signals, but much more costly. And then there's this new version that's, I guess, being contemplated now. So, okay,
And we'd love
thank you.
those at Mansion as well, if we can get them.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
I know this isn't, but we're also here to ask council to support our petition to the region to get a crossing guard at Frederick and Lancaster. So, I know that's not your job, but we would love your support.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a question of staff, but I also have one question of the gentleman that gave the video presentation. You showed a chart with the blue bar graphs that indicated accidents on the street, and then you showed police reports. Yeah, are the second page, are they in addition, are these in addition to those shown on the blue chart?
These are representative of the ones shown in the blue chart, right?
Mr.
It sounds like
Carmichael.
Mr. Carmichael might be better to answer that question.
Thank you, through you, the chair, to the committee. The bar chart you saw was the number of collisions that have occurred at the intersection of Lancaster and Frederick Street. That was provided by the region of Waterloo. So those collision numbers are purely at the intersection. The subsequent slide is information that we have provided that outlines the collisions on Lancaster between Victoria and Krug, excluding the intersection.
So they're in
Frederick.
addition to, yeah.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, I have another question of staff, but I can wait.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Singh, yours is at the delegation? No. Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, that's all for you guys. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming in. Thank you. Can we wait, hold off on our questions until we hear all the delegations from staff? But I put both of you in the queue first for questions of staff. Next we have Angela from the Bethany Church.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors and staff. I'm sorry I'm not feeling the best today. I'll try to make this fairly quick. I'm here to represent Bethany Church. I'm also a member of the CFNA and live one house away from Lancaster Street. We just wanted to say from Bethany Church that we fully support all of the initiatives set forth by the CFNA. We're behind them 100%. We will even participate in whatever way we possibly can. We have a letter here from Ministry Council to that effect. We also have a letter citing some of the incidences that people from Bethany have witnessed. Our custodian works on the street often, as you can imagine, with caretaking of the lawn and such, and he often yells at vehicles because he fears for his own safety and that of the children. Staff and visitors have too often witnessed, because it's on a Sunday, people are out cycling, so they have witnessed vehicles passing cyclists at far too fast. First of all, it's illegal to pass, but then it's also far too fast. The traffic before and after school, Bethany has made their lot available to students, to parents to pick up their students. And so they witness these dangerous interactions all the time, people crossing forth. There's one crossing guard there. She has her hands full. Just the other day, someone had crossed turned it right into, on Chapel Street, between two parties of people bringing their children to school. The crossing guard can't do everything. A pedestrian activated crosswalk would also greatly benefit Bethany in their programs. We're not allowed to use the schoolyard for, say, summer camp because, well, I shouldn't say that. We have permission to use it, but it's very difficult to walk a pile of kids up to Frederick and cross Frederick and then go into the schoolyard. Whereas if there was, and we're not allowed to use our own crossing guard. We have people in our church that are, pro crossing guards, and they were told that they cannot cross at Bethany without a city contracted guard. So it would just be absolutely amazing. As far as outside of traffic hours, as you asked earlier, Bethany being most of the traffic being there on Sunday. A lot of people park at the school and they cross there. And so the pedestrian activated crosswalk would be very beneficial in just about everything that we do with children at Bethany. We're very happy that you're considering reducing the speed limit on Lancaster. One of the biggest problems that we see is people speeding up, either coming south on Lancaster or north through the traffic lights at Frederick. If they turn yellow, people are gunning it right in front of the school, right in front of the church, trying to race that yellow light. And then also on the way back, and this happens daily, also on the way back, I'm saying on the way back because I'm standing at the church. So traveling south on Lancaster, it's the same thing. They gun it to get the lights, and they're still speeding when they pass by the school, and all of a sudden it's the school, we need to slow down. And this happens all the time. We look forward to working with the CFNA and you on any initiatives you propose to exist. I'll just stop there because pretty much everything else was covered. Also, I should mention that one of the incidences reported was a pedestrian struck a Victoria in Lancaster. That pedestrian was me. Where should I leave this letter?
The clerk will come and take it.
Thank you.
from you. Thank you very much for your presentation. There are a couple questions. Councillor Marsh. Sorry, Angela. There's a couple.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. A couple questions for you.
Angel,
Sorry,
thank
hi,
you.
sir.
Hi, thank you for coming in. I just wanted
Certainly.
to thank you, and I was glad you mentioned about the camp, and it would be great if we could see your campers be able to use the playground more easily. So,
Yeah, for sure.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Angela, for coming
Thank
in.
you.
I guess this question is for you, but also if the chair will allow a similar question to the previous delegations, if they can just nod their heads. Have any of you guys expressed your concerns to the school board? Because a lot of this seems to be dealing around the school.
I don't know for sure. I'm sure we have a lot of correspondence with the school. I'm not sure if there's a report to the school. I would imagine there is, but I'm not aware of that. I could ask and get back to you.
Okay,
Would that be okay?
that's fine. I just want I think one of the.
I can answer that.
Oh,
I can
can you?
answer that
Okay.
question, but am I allowed to? No.
Joanne, are you next?
Pardon?
Are you Joanne?
I am.
You can come up next. We'll get you to answer that question.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, great. Thanks.
Can you ask again, Bill?
Yes, yeah.
That's all your questions?
That's all the questions.
Okay. Joanne can answer that with her delegation next. Thank you very much. That's all the
Thank
questions we
you.
have for you. All right. With that, Joanne, you're up anyways. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff. My name is Joanne Davis, and I've been a resident in the Central Frederick neighborhood on Brubaker Street for 22 years, since 1994. So I guess I'm here today to tell you how long-standing this issue has been for our neighborhood. When I moved to the neighborhood, I guess I wasn't entirely aware of the issues on Lancaster Street until I had children. And in 1999, my first child started going to Moppet Preschool, which is in Sotheby School, and so we began our 13-year journey, twice a day, sometimes 4 times a day, down Brubaker Street, along Lancaster, up to the school, across the sidewalk, across the crossing to the school. And so for 13 years, I walked my kids back and forth. And the safety of that street frightened me almost every day, walking my young children. They're active boys. They ran ahead. My heart was in my gut so many times as they raced down Lancaster Street home, not realizing they were not in a safe place. I knew, but they didn't. So I was also a member of the school council at Sotheby for many years, sat for many years on the Central Frederick Neighborhood Association. I'm a founding member of the Downtown Community Center. In fact, I was one of the founding organizers of that place. So I'm a very active, or was, a very active community person and still very much care about my neighborhood. And I guess my biggest issue is that I wanted and want for my children and for all the children and families in our neighborhood to live in a place that feels really walkable and really livable. And so walking along Lancaster Street is such a barrier because we've talked about cars going fast and when do they go fast and when are the volumes. And yes, there's lots of volume at the commuting times, but the times that there isn't commuting, people drive so fast down that street. 80 kilometers an hour, 90 kilometers an hour, so that you feel you're like your life is threatened sometimes. So that's my perspective on that. And so there was 2 different times over the years that I was involved in a movement to try to change the speed on Lancaster to try to make it more safe for families. We held community meetings, we met with staff, we met with the school, we met with the church, we met with everybody, and always we got all the families in the neighborhood saying the same thing. So I was really glad to see that the speeds were reduced on that section of Lancaster. That's really, really wonderful, and also that the stripes were added to the crosswalk across to Sudbury. So those two things are really positive, but I think there's so much more that could be done. And it really is a long-standing issue. So I would encourage you to support anything that these folks here are suggesting to make our community more walkable for families. And I know that it's a really important thing for families and children to want to walk, right? We know that we have an obesity epidemic, and kids don't walk. They get driven. They don't feel safe. And so if we don't make communities that kids feel safe to walk in, that issue is just not going to be addressed in the same way. So I think that's another important issue to consider. I can also answer the question, Councillor I'm sorry.
Ioannidis.
Can you repeat that question?
The question just, has the school board been contacted?
When we met in 2012, I believe it was, we had a community meeting. We met at the school, and I tried to involve the principal, and all they can do really, I mean, the city hires the school crossing guard. They really didn't want to get involved. It wasn't their issue. So we tried. They were not interested. Also, the other point, and this is the last point I really want to make, is that people cross there at different times of the day as well. Like, my kids use that yard as a playground. So if I was to try to encourage them to cross at that crosswalk when there isn't a crossing guard, they're taking their life in their own hands every time they cross, right? So if we want children to be able to use the playground that way, they have to feel safe crossing. So if we could put in a push-button activated crossing, I think that would really encourage more children to play in that open playground. Also, Moppet Preschool, which is in the basement of Sudbury School, they cross at different times, so they don't get a crossing guard. So they are left to their own devices to try to get across. So I guess that's all I have to say. Just to say this is a very, very long-standing issue, and I really hope that we can put further effort into addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanne, for your presentation. There doesn't appear to be any questions for you, but thank you very much for your presentation. So we'll move we will ask questions of staff, but I do want, having a heads up, that Councillor Marsh has a motion. I would actually like you to bring that onto the floor now, so that if council members have any questions of that with regards to staff, then we can ask those now as well. So we'll turn to the motion Councillor Marsh is bringing forward, and then we'll get queued up for questions of staff. You can read it, but try to prevent from commenting until all questions have been asked of staff.
You bet. So here's my motion. It has 4 parts to it. That staff be directed to work with residents in the Lancaster Street neighborhood to increase the level of safety for pedestrians and cyclists on Lancaster with the following actions. The first would be just to confirm feasibility of the placement of planter boxes on the boulevard of Lancaster Street East between Victoria and Krug Street, and provide guidance and support as needed to install these planter boxes. The second is to finalize a design that would really just be to reapply an existing crosswalk at Lancaster and Chapel and install it by the time school starts in September 2016. The third point is to identify Lancaster Street as a priority roadway for implementing pedestrian-activated crossovers at 2 intersections, both at Chapel Street and at Mansion Street. And the fourth point is to arrange for residents of the Lancaster Street neighborhood to present at the Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee about their recommendations for making it safer for cyclists and vehicles to share the road.
Thank you very much. That's in addition to the staff recommendations, right? The 40-kilometer. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure that that was in there as well. Okay. So then we'll turn to Councillor Gazzola for questions of staff.
Yeah, the first question I have is of staff. Where did this street place on the priority listing when we were dealing with traffic calming?
Mr. Carmichael?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. Excellent question, Councillor Gazzola, and one I did not bring my sheet with, but it's 40th. Does that sound familiar, Sarah? Yeah, it's not at the utmost top, but it's in there at 30, 40, 50 in that area. I think that's a reflection of the fact that because of the roadway design, the speeds are lower. Relatively speaking, folks, don't take that the wrong way, and that the collision incidents, while has occurred, is probably in the area of typical. So, having said that, I think we're pleased to work with the neighborhood association going forward on doing solutions outside of the traffic calming process.
Okay, another question: what is staff's stance on these pedestrian crosswalks? Do we use those anymore, or do we use them? I have seen them used well in other jurisdictions, and I'm just wondering to what extent we use them.
Through the chair, in response, the new pedestrian, the PXO Level 2s, is a legislation that just came into effect at the beginning of this year by the province. And at the regional level, we have met with the region and all local municipalities within the region to discuss how we're going to deal with this new legislation for pedestrian crossovers. We're encouraged by the legislation that allows us, provides us with another tool to address safety issues related to traffic and pedestrian safety. The plan this year, and you folks will be getting a report from us in the next couple of months at the city level, but the region have already gone to their council on this, and the plan is to implement these new Level 2 PXO signs at all roundabouts this year in 2016 within the region. What that will do is bring them to the attention of drivers, get drivers used to their existence, and also allow staff to do some studies, some observations to determine how well they're working. While that's happening, staff from all the jurisdictions will be meeting and also discussing mid-block and other intersection locations. When I say other intersection locations, ones that aren't controlled by a signal or a roundabout. Those are to be prioritized based on requests that each municipality has received, but also based on studies. So the plan is to implement at roundabouts this year, develop a priority plan for implementing them at mid-block and other intersection locations next year. In this regard, we fully anticipate Lancaster Street to be certainly the area where we'd first be prepared to put in some PXO crossings. And keep in mind, they are subject to a warrant, require a minimum amount of pedestrian traffic, but it's significantly less stringent than this warrants that currently exist for putting in an intersection pedestrian signal, which we refer to, where it's a full signal, full actuation, significant costs. These new ones allow it, effectively provide the same right-of-way for pedestrians, but are much cheaper and a lot easier to put in, and the warrants are less stringent. So we'll obviously have to follow up with studies, but we see opportunities there.
You're using up all my time. Thank you. I just want to make a brief comment. I have seen those used widely in New York State, and they work very well. So I brought this to staff a few years ago, and I'm glad to see that something is coming out of it. The final question I have, we're obviously going to be going to a 40 kilometer per hour limit on this street. Will those signs be any different than the signs that we have there now? Is it possible to have a colored sign or something to indicate to drivers that it is different? Because if it's just the changing of the number, I don't think a lot of motorists will see that.
Through the chair, in response to that inquiry, we are obligated to follow the Ontario Traffic Manual, which is legislated regulatory traffic control signs. So we would be putting up the standard speed limit sign there.
Well, what can we do about that? That's, you know, to me, I would notice is that it's a different speed limit, but if it's not changed, doesn't it make sense to have a different type of sign? So if we can't do it, what can we do to change the province's rules?
In response, I can appreciate the suggestion for a different design type for the sign to bring attention to it. This has been used in other areas of traffic engineering, but I will caution that the reality is that after a few months, that's just another sign that falls into the other signs that drivers have to obey to, and it doesn't stand out after a short time period and loses any effectiveness it may have had. And I will also repeat the importance of consistent signing province-wide for all our traffic regulations so that we create expectations for drivers.
We can add a new, like on top of the 40 kilometers, we can add the standard new so that for the course of 6 months or whatever, we can have that up there so people have that extra recognition.
Forgive me, and that is also recommended through the Ontario Traffic Manual as well, to put up the new sunburst when the regulation has changed, and we would do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. And I had some of the similar concern. I'm glad to see that there is some measure for us to be able to kind of bring to attention the change in the speed. Because again, as you said it's a frustrating fact, but motorists sometimes don't adhere to the signage when it comes to the speed limit. And so because of that, obviously with the additional recommendation that's coming forward by Councillor Marsh, so do you think that would be effective, obviously having some additional measures? Hearing constantly through our transportational department, through staff, that signage doesn't always have the same impact. So is there anything that staff have in mind beyond what's already being recommended and the measures that are being recommended through Councillor Marsh with the planters and some sort of art at the intersection? I'm assuming that would satisfy some concerns, would it not?
In response through the chair, I think the motion that has been put forward in front of council has a lot of merit to it, and from a staff level, we are more than happy to follow up on those things and feel that there's going to be some positive outcomes of what's being suggested here. Outside of what's been suggested in the typical signing, obviously police enforcement is an option to assist out there. Our speed advisory program, where we have a student can go out to that location with a display board. It's more of an educational program to bring attention to the drivers in the area that speeds are of concern. We also have a unit that can be lent out to the residents if they're interested in doing so. Keep in mind, we get demands for that across the city, so the amount of time we'd be out there might not be satisfactory to the neighborhood, and that's why we do offer a unit to the residents if they want to run it on weekends or evenings. We're more than happy to do that as well.
Can that be done in an ongoing period, just as a reminder? Because again, it's a 6 month, and after 6 months, it's a shortened period, and then people do go back to consistent behavior. So can that not continuously be provided on a random basis?
In response, I would recommend that be the case, yes, that the speed advisory program be revisited every few months to remind drivers in the area of the concerns.
Can we take that action ourselves as opposed to having the neighborhood make that request? We know what the issues are, it's our responsibility to mitigate.
Based on the demands we get across the city, and I don't think it's any news to council that we get speeding complaints across the city on a regular basis, and with all due respect, this isn't the only challenge area we have with speeding. We certainly can, but it's not a matter of we're not going to be able to have them out there for a day a week. Maybe a half a day every month is realistically what we could provide based on the demands we get across the city.
Okay. This may not be an appropriate question right now, but even if you can respond individually, just the cost of these units, what it really costs to purchase them, would be added benefit for us to know. The other thing is for the planters, for them to be close to the curb. Any issues or concerns on that as those plants grow? Any safety issues? Or is that something that would need to be properly filtered through?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question, and one we've worked with enforcement in the past on acceptable treatments within boulevards. We've had challenges in the past. So going forward on this, we would engage enforcement, we would engage our legal and risk management people, probably planning as well, because it might tie into the neighborhood strategy, things like that. So there's things we have to make sure we concern ourselves with and address any concerns they may be that way. But I'd like to think that a solution could come up.
So quickly, just reconfirmation. So the intersection art and the planters, obviously, they seem like reasonable suggestions. but the activated signal, that may be a cost is the primary factor there, from what I heard from the previous question and answer.
I just think there's some wording challenges here in the activated signal. The new pedestrian crossover legislation that just came into effect does give right-of-way to pedestrians, but it does not include an actuation for pedestrians. It would work best when the pedestrians indicate that they're crossing, whether it's pointing their finger, and that's part of why we're recommending that these be, implemented on a staged basis so that we have drivers acclimated to them and know what they mean. So that's one of the challenges, getting drivers used to this new legislation. I'm confident that certainly once we get them in place and drivers get used to them, that they'll be a very effective tool that give the pedestrians the right of way.
Okay. So it's a quick question to Councillor Marsh, Madam Chair. So change that wordage. Would it be more prudent to say the staff investigate as opposed to outline and directing them to do so, specifically from the concerns that are raised by staff? So that's not to say that this is not a valid point that needs to be looked at further, but I think we do have to delegate this to staff to look at it further as opposed to really outlining that this should immediately be done.
I can appreciate that concern, and we don't want to be seen to be jumping the queue, or but so for number 3, if we just change the wording, the first word from the word identify to consider, would that be something that's better?
That direction
suited
would
to
be more
everyone?
appropriate by staff. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to quickly remind people that this was a consent item, so there was no time allotted to it, and we've taken an hour, and while it's a very important issue, I just want we still have 4 more people in the queue to ask questions, so try to keep them succinct, and we need to move on. We've got consultants and other delegations for other items. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, I didn't hear the answer for the cost of what these signals would be. Do you have an idea?
Through the chair, in response, if you're asking about the new PXO legislation, we're talking about probably less than $1,000 per location, just a few $100s for some signs. When we get into heavier traffic volumes, some flashing beacons are required as well, but it's not a significant cost.
Okay. I guess my question is regards to the passive traffic calming issues that we passed during budget. Where is the status of that?
I'm sorry, can you expound further on that question?
Council had passed a resolution outside of having the traffic calming measures, the passive ones. Where's the status of that?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Staff are currently working on what we're referring to as a smaller scale traffic calming review, and that will be presented to Council later this year in the fall. So staff are working on that right now, coming up with options to provide Council with other opportunities, other tools to provide traffic calming on roadways such as this before it meets a formal traffic calming review.
So wouldn't it be more appropriate to do that with this, when that coincides with that?
I would recommend that there is a number of things that we can do based on the resolution in front of us today that we can do outside of that process, but I think we have to be mindful of that process going forward as well. And I'm comfortable that to the point where staff are with their review and working with this, that we won't compromise one with the other.
Justin, did you want to add something?
Sure. Through the chair, I'd just like to add that policy has been delayed slightly due to staffing challenges in our area. We've had a few vacancies in transportation services, and so that has delayed the bringing that policy forward to Council.
So it's your fault then. Just teasing. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any further questions. I think I'm comfortable with what I see here.
Okay, Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. On number 3, and we've changed the wording of anything, I was actually going to ask the question of Councillor Marsh and or staff about should we actually put in a specific wording as to timing so that this does actually come back by a certain time. So just to be clear, you're saying that by sometime next year this report's coming back?
Through the chair, in response, Our intent at this point is to develop over the late 2016, early 2017, the recommended locations that are outside of the current, that are going in at roundabouts. So I would like to think, yes, within a year's time.
So
could
we
be
said
recommending these.
by June 2017 for number 3, that would probably work for you?
No question.
Okay, so maybe that's something Councillor Marsh can consider to her core motion.
Can
as
I
opposed
also
to doing an
recommend that,
amendment?
I'm sorry, Mayor Ivanovic, can
Sorry.
we also recommend that we eliminate the pedestrian activated aspect of that resolution? It technically doesn't fall into the new PXO designs, so. Pedestrian crossover.
Hold on.
Forgive me for my use of acronyms.
Okay. That's fine. So let's get that working. The residents talk about the suggestion of other roadway markings, and I think that means intersection painting and so on, like we did in another part of the ward. That's not part of the recommendation today. Has staff or you, Councillor Marsh, considered that as an option anywhere here?
I believe that's number 2, finalize the design to reapply the existing cross. Is that not
No, that's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at like artwork kind of painting kind of stuff.
I think that's number 2. Councillor Marsh, can you confirm?
Yeah, just to clarify, number 2 is to finalize a design that would be installed using a more cost-effective method, such as thermoplast, that would last for years. My understanding is that staff will be coming forward in the next few months to come back about the pilot study that was done on Aarons and Wilhelm, and at that point, I believe that Lancaster Street residents will be interested to, if council approves the idea that more residents in other areas of the city will be able to paint the roadways, then that's something that Lancaster Street residents are interested to do. They just didn't want to bring everything forward all at one time, but that
Okay.
will be a future consideration.
So that is part
Mr.
of number
Carmichael
2.
would like to respond as well, please.
Yes, thank you, through you, the Chair. Councillor Marsh is accurate in her comments. Just to clarify further, our hope is to work as soon as possible with the CFNA on the design of the crosswalk and come up with some imaginative, creative design within that crosswalk that will bring further attention to it and hopefully increase the safe operations in that area. As mentioned, we're coming back in the next month or two to you folks with a follow-up from our pilot project at Aarons and Wilhelm. Keep in mind that that project was based on low-volume roadways, and the intersection mural painting process was recommended based on low-traffic volume roadways. So there might be some challenges with Lancaster, but that's something we can consider through the process.
Okay, last question, Mr. May. I raised with the delegation the question of the neighborhood grants. Would they be eligible for applying for grants as part of this kind of initiative?
Yeah, Mr. May.
Through you, Madam Chair, while I can't speak to the specifics, this type of project is exactly what the Magic Grant is for.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
No, mine have been answered, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the questions. So we have a motion on the floor that's been moved by Councillor Marsh. You're good? Almost. Oh, okay, almost. I ask that if anyone's making comments to keep it to under a minute, if possible, please. Just because we are far, far beyond our consent item time limit. Councillor Marsh, would you like to go first or last? Okay. Okay. Mayor Vermanovic, you're first.
Yeah, just very quickly, I will be supporting this. I want to thank Councillor Marsh and the neighborhood for working together to coming up with creative ideas beyond, just sort of saying let's put speed bumps in or anything like that. I think this is a reasonable approach to dealing with a long-standing problem in this stretch of roadway. I do drive it from time to time, and I sense some of the issues even when I drive it. I think there's, through that other report that staff are looking at, there's creative ideas we can continue to look at. I mean, I had somebody send me some marketing material recently of little sort of stand-up people kind of thing you can put in intersections and have them, or basically to slow people down and move them around. But I think the long and the short of it is this is really what neighborhood creative problem solving is all about. And I applaud everyone for the work that was done to bring this together.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I'll just speak briefly. Again, I want to thank the residents. I think what they've come forward with is very reasonable, and we don't always see reasonable suggestions coming. Several times we've seen people that want to see a stop sign every 500 meters. But these are very reasonable and innovative as well. I just wanted to go on the record, though, with my understanding of what I'm supporting. The planter boxes, I think, is an interesting idea. I'm not aware of that sort of neighborhood-initiated thing elsewhere in the city. So I know there's going to be some work done in that, but I just want to be clear that I'm supporting that there isn't any dollars allocated from the city to that, except for perhaps some grant dollars if that comes through. So I look forward to that. And in terms of the pedestrian crossover, I'm still a little unclear on the activated, but it's going to be coming back to council as well. So I'm inclined to support, and I would say good work to the ward councillor on this.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I just wanted to say that I'm in an ongoing way frustrated at the turtle pace of these kind of situations. I mean, a year is not good enough to me, but I'll support the motion. But waiting a year for some of these provisions is just too much. I've had a similar experience in Victoria Park with a crossing. There's an obvious need there, and it just drags on and drags on. I think, as usual, the residents in the area, to me, are the experts. They know what they're seeing and experiencing. And I'm surprised that in the report before us, as I say, I support Councillor Marsh's motion, but I'm surprised that we don't see more in that report. It's an ongoing, and I appreciate the red tape and the bureaucracy and who approves and why we can't approve, but it really is too much for this kind of wait to take place. So as I say, I'll support Councillor Marsh's motion. I compliment her on that motion. I think it should have come much earlier than this. Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, congratulate the neighborhood. We went from a very straightforward solution to the safety concerns on that roadway, but with the ward councillor and good work to Councillor Marsh and the resident, compliments to them for being realistic and reasonable with the demand on what needs to be done, and finding really solutions that are more specific to your street and your neighborhood, and that's what's going to work best. And I look forward to how the approach goes as well, so that we can continue to replicate that in other parts of the city where similar concerns exist.
Councillor Ioannidis?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. One of these issues that we see often from many neighborhoods, and initially I was kind of skeptic with this because, it seemed to me that we were sort of trying to look at skipping the queue here, but after reading the motion here and dealing with, talking with Councillor Marsh and listening to Mr. Carmichael's comments, that in lieu that within the less than a year's time, that this can dovetail in with that study with the passive traffic calming. I think this is a reasonable request, and yes, it may be red tape, but I think we have to be cognizant that there's other areas in the city, and I have some in my area, and just because residents come and complain doesn't mean that we can always just fix every issue. So, but again, great work by Councillor Marsh and from the staff. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thanks. I think one of the concerns I have about this situation is this is everywhere in our city, and I'm so appreciative of the neighborhood coming in and bringing in ideas, working with staff, But I'm concerned that we can't do this everywhere in our city. I want us to do this kind of thing everywhere in our city. And so I'm hoping that because of your great ideas and because of the work that you've been doing with staff, that we, myself in Ward 4, where tragically we lost 2 young men not that long ago, that we can piggyback on some of these ideas as well. Because I hear time and time again from residents that council is not doing enough to safeguard their children as they walk to school, to safeguard their children as they play on their front yards. So I'm looking forward to that report that Mr. Carmichael is talking about, and hopefully we can, using that report, some of the ideas that I sent to him from one of the residents that they sent to me from Quebec, that we can use all of these different ideas to start expediting traffic calming all through the city on streets where we don't have to put in vertical deflection, but we can put in something that makes people think that they need to slow down, that maybe it's not their child that's running down the street to school, but it could be their friend's child or their sister's child or their brother's child, and everybody needs to slow down.
Councillor Marsh?
First, I just want to thank the residents who have taken time out of their busy days, taken themselves away. Some of them have taken a whole day off work or away from other priorities. So I'm getting some kudos from my colleagues here, but it's really these folks that we have to thank for showing up and taking initiative. So I'm overwhelmed with the support, and I really am appreciative of my colleagues here on council it sounds like there's a fair bit of support for this motion, and so let's vote on it. We know that this is not the first time we've heard from the folks at Lancaster, and we know that this is not the last we're going to hear from the folks at Lancaster. Hopefully we'll hear some report backs about how some of these initiatives have been effective. I know that for other wards in the city that have been noted, we have issues of pedestrian and cycling safety. And of course, the residents that are here before us today would be more than glad to share their ideas and success stories and challenges with other residents in other parts, so that we can see some creative solutions happening throughout the city. So with that, thank you, and let's see this vote pass.
Recorded vote's been asked for. Just as we set that up, I just want to just thank the residents for coming in and putting your voice behind this issue. And we do deal with it all across the city. Your time and dedication is definitely noticed by all of us around this horseshoe. So thank you very much. With that, recorded vote's been called. It's carried unanimously. So thank you very much. That will come to committee to council next Monday. 2 people in the queue for. We've already moved the consent items. We voted on them. Yeah. Yeah, we just voted on it, a recorded vote. Yeah, the whole motion was in together. Yeah, because you moved the whole thing. Yep. If it's very important, Councillor Singh, go ahead.
Thank you. I would appreciate it. Actually, just regarding the number 3 for Holy Trinity Church, Gloria, I had a quick question of Gloria. I wanted to make sure the.
Okay, just go quick.
Thank you. I know
because technically I'm supposed to take a motion to remove it off consent, but we've already passed it, so go ahead.
Sure, thank you. I just want to make sure the concerns of the neighborhood are passed on. This is something we continue to hear regarding more immediate residents that back onto the church property, where issues of, you know what the concerns are. I'm not going to repeat them again. It's consistent, and making sure that those issues are again reiterated to the organizers, that they try to mitigate to the best of their ability. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Will do.
Okay, so we're moving on then to item number 8, which is the Stormwater Management Master Plan Final Report. It looks like Nick's going to make the introduction for me, and we are going to move through the presentation, and they requested that after each section that we ask our questions about that section as we move forward. So we will take that, but we need to keep this moving forward. We got 2 more items after this. So, Nick, you're on.
Madam Chair and committee members, I'm very pleased for the opportunity to present the finalized Stormwater Master Plan environmental assessment. Final copies of the documents are located in Mayor and Council's office, as well as clerks, and the 9th floor and online, so they are accessible to all. The presentation, which I will shortly hand over to Chris Stenick from Aquifer Beach, will focus on 6 key elements of the plan, which are operations and maintenance, market-based strategies, stormwater for the Capital Roads Program, which is really AIRP, stormwater management facilities, watercourse and erosion restoration, and urban flood management. So without further ado, I will hand it to Chris to go through some of the details.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present. The Integrated Stormwater Management Master Plan has been completed, and the EA, as Nick mentioned, has been finalized and is posted. Today, I'd just like to go through quickly the study process, the master plan overview, the study purpose, the problem statement, goals and objectives, summary of the existing conditions, and primarily a review of the 6 elements of the recommended approach. The final element of the presentation is going to detail some next steps, which is the development of an implementation plan. In terms of the study process, the study began in October 2014. We've had a series of consultations, including 2 public open houses, and we are here at the study completion, which is the finalization of the class environmental assessment, the master plan. Following that step, as I've mentioned, is the next step of an implementation plan development. And this implementation plan, which we'll talk about later in the presentation, is a separate element outside the class environmental assessment, but really is how do we then excuse me, move that environmental assessment forward to implement and get these elements into the ground and working for us in the community. So in terms of what a master plan is, a stormwater management master plan is a long-term planning document which follows the environmental assessment process. This particular study undertook approach number 2 of the MEA, and this, therefore, it fulfills Schedule A+, and B projects and identifies any Schedule C projects for future studies. What this means is that A+, and B projects, following additional public consultation and design, can go directly to implementation. In terms of the study purpose, why did we undertake this master plan? One of the primary goals was to replace and update the existing 2001 Stormwater Management Master Plan policy. This master plan enables the city to identify opportunities and really to be proactive in addressing stormwater management issues before they become a problem in the city. The master plan provides direction for resource requirements and works for all of the 6 main elements of the ISWIM MP, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And really it focuses on an integrated approach. This particular master plan, why it's an integrated master plan is this particular bullet right here. These projects are completed where possible with existing and planned city initiatives. In this way, we're better able to serve the residents of Kitchener and reduce overall project costs. So really it's about efficiency, and it's about increasing optimizing what we can do in terms of stormwater in the community. There we go. In terms of the problem statement and why we really undertook this, it's a realization that urban areas can degrade the environment in many ways, and this is a result of both existing development and new development. So we routinely see and have identified through other studies, including the master plan, degraded water quality in the city of Kitchener, increased stream temperatures, which would be an issue for our fish populations, increased sediment loads to our watercourses in the Grand River, a loss and degradation of habitat. We have riverine flooding, which we have seen through things like the Wards and Brigadoon failure. We have erosion, we see here in the Hidden Valley roadway. And we also have urban flooding, which we classify differently than riverine flooding, but this is Fairview Mall. So we have issues that we know about in the City of Kitchener, and the master plan intends to address those. And underlying all this is the realization that 75% of the urban area in the City of Kitchener does not have stormwater management for quantity or quality control. That is a reality in most Ontario municipalities, and the City of Kitchener is no different in that regard. In terms of the goals and objectives, the Integrated Stormwater Management Master Plan considers flooding, erosion, groundwater, surface water quality, the environmental management, and infrastructure in an integrated manner. So to think about this conceptually, we have urban runoff, which we see every time it rains. These inputs go into the Grand River. They infiltrate into the groundwater system as part of natural processes. These two inputs are a source of Kitchener's drinking water in the region. So this is very important in terms of protecting our resources. Of course, this water then ultimately discharges to a wastewater treatment plant, which ultimately discharges back to the Grand River. So this is an integrated study recognizing these interrelated features of our water system and our stormwater system and how that all fits together. So we developed a comprehensive set of goals and objectives, which basically were established for water quality, quantity, erosion control, the natural environment, water resources across the city, infrastructure, policy and implementation, as well as for the community as well. We have summarized the existing conditions in an existing conditions report, which is an appendices to the master plan. It's a comprehensive document, and it integrates all the past research as well as current research done as part of the master plan. And we've tried to really illustrate this in a series of figures, and I'll just show you a few of these. And what you see here are existing conditions, watershed health, so this is stream health. And you can see we've qualified or quantified how each watershed is doing. And this is important when we look forward to the implementation plan. So we have different ratings for stream health. We've also done this for water quality in the City of Kitchener, for aquatic ecology, terrestrial ecology, as well as stormwater management. So we now can quantify how we are doing in each one of these, and this is detailed in a very comprehensive report in the class environmental assessment. In terms of studies and opportunities, we assessed and developed stormwater opportunities relating to municipal pollution prevention, operation, and maintenance practices as one of the elements. The second element is market-based strategies on private property. This is source controls, so where the rainwater falls, as well as stormwater management for capital roads, what we refer to as conveyance controls. Stormwater management facilities is the fourth element. The fifth element is water courses and erosion restoration. And finally, the sixth is urban flood management and stormwater infrastructure. So we're going to go through the 6 elements, and we'll pause for questions after each element.
I'm going to pause just for a second before we get in, because we already have a couple questions. So if they're specific to what what Chris has just presented, please ask now. If it's under one of these, then you can wait. And because there's going to be 6 opportunities to speak, I'm going to try and decrease your time allotment. And if you still have questions at the very end of the presentation, we can come back to them. So I'm thinking 3 minutes per time for questions, and we'll just try to go with that for now. Councillor Ioannidis, you have a question before we get into... We're going to go through each one separately. Okay, Councillor Fernandez? Okay, Councillor Fernandez, did you have something now, or...?
Yep, now and then later. So, Chris, you'll have to be really succinct since we only get 3 minutes. Just going to the conversation about the urban development, and it's been an ongoing concern of mine that we see urban sprawl as a negative effect on water courses, and of course my pet one is Strasbourg Creek, but Schneider Creek has really seen some degradation. Do we have some actual practices that we're going to be seeing coming out of this report that will affect how we accept and approve future green space development?
Through the chair, yes. The master plan specifically deals, its primary focus is existing urban areas, but there are recommendations in the master plan for enhanced erosion and sediment control. There are recommendations that influence planning, new development, infills, redevelopments, and so in the implementation plan, there are elements that will be brought forward in more detail as part of the implementation plan, but there are recommendations within the EA report as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola, just general ones right now.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions now and some for later. The first one is, what period of time would you say that this master plan is really aimed at to cover?
Through the chair, the intent, the timing of the master plan is that this document is a 15-year document or greater.
So going forward for 15 years. Yeah, and I wonder if you could just spend a couple minutes explaining the Schedule B EAs for me to see to what you keep referring to that because you've done that. It's going to save doing something in the future. Can you just go into a little more detail on that?
Through the chair, the intent of a master plan is really to have a large document that encompasses the entire study area of the City of Kitchener. This is done in a comprehensive fashion, which allows individual projects to be identified and to fulfill the schedule requirements under the Class EA process. So some projects are A or A+. Those are pre-approved under the municipal environmental assessment process. And Schedule B projects have a known environmental impact, but we can quantify what those impacts are. And as well, the master plan, because it's approach 2, would satisfy those requirements as well. So there are 4 approaches in a master plan process. We've done number 2, which means that the projects that are identified in this master plan will not have to go through additional environmental assessments unless they are a Schedule C. But at this time, we do not have any Schedule Cs in the master plan.
Okay. Councillor Singh, general? Yeah, go ahead.
And again, if you feel that the question may be answered through your later on questions that you will ask, just say so, and then I'll defer. The master plan, will it be overarching enough that takes into account other works that are being done from planning department as to how we plan our city when it comes to impact of urban sprawl, as opposed to do we put more focus on infill guidelines? Does that include that and the impacts of both those options?
Through the chair, the master plan was done with a very extensive consultation both with stakeholders as well as city staff from all departments. The focus being that keyword integrated. We have looked at everything from trails to parks planning, roads projects, and you'll see as we talk about the individual elements that they are not exclusively stormwater driven. They are there to provide additional stormwater control, but as well to complement existing city programs, both planned and under construction currently.
And the reason why I ask is the cost for mitigation of stormwater management, and we're finding this and realizing, is not cheap. It's an extensive endeavor, and that's why, as we plan our city into the future, how do we mitigate those costs? By planning the right way. That's all.
Through the chair, the difference between this master plan and previous master plans, say of the 2001 vintage or in the last 10 years, really is that focus on integration. We are seeing significant cost decreases in the implementation of stormwater controls if we can do them as part of existing or planned projects. And the master plan has a significant focus on that for the City of Kitchener.
Good, thank you.
Okay, you may proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. To move on to the first element, municipal pollution prevention and maintenance practices. This element of the recommended approach will ensure that pollutants are prevented from impacting the environment and the existing stormwater infrastructure maintain their effectiveness going forward. The key elements, and these are the key elements from the recommended approach, are sediment removal from catch basins in areas without stormwater controls. And there is a detailed study in the appendices on that element. And as well, the immediate maintenance of 16 oil and grit separators and the continued maintenance of all oil and grit separator units per the recommended schedule, per the legislative requirement. So I will take questions on those 2 elements of the recommended approach.
Councillor Gazzola, those specifically? Yep.
I'm interested in this area because we're seeing more and more sediment that we have to deal with. One of the issues that I always have concern with is that we tend to blow more stuff onto the streets, expecting it to disappear, but it's going to go one place. And in that line is this whole issue of putting all our leaves on the road. I'm just curious as to, with this master plan study, if we've gotten into some consideration or reconsideration of that whole issue of leaves on the road?
Through the chair, the master plan looked at a long list of elements for each of these recommended approaches, and we talked to city staff about existing programs. There is an existing leaf pickup and street sweeping program, which is in the order of about $500,000 per year, which is a comprehensive program that covers the city. The additional element that we have looked at is how we can optimize those two processes to allow sediment removals from the catch basins in areas in that 75% where we do not have control, so that we can use the catch basins as a primary treatment device to remove that sediment before it reaches the water courses. This would be an interim approach until additional elements of the master plan could potentially be implemented in those uncontrolled watersheds. So it's part of that whole process, the whole program.
I'm not sure you've answered my question, but that's fine.
I can clarify. I'm happy to clarify if you'd like.
That's fine. That's fine for now.
Councillor Fernandez.
So I'm bringing forward a concern that was listed at the Environmental Committee by John Jackson, because I think it was a very valid point, and there was a number of other issues, other members that brought forward the same point, and that was around the wording pollution prevention. I'd like you to answer that question as you did to the Environmental Committee, but also I'm going to talk about his concerns using that pollution prevention instead of using pollution control. He was concerned that with the recent discharge to the Grand River, that we have to make sure that the water is treated before those kind of things happen. So can you respond to, do you remember Mr. Jackson's comments? Okay, I don't think I need to go any further than that.
Through the chair, we took those comments from Mr. Jackson. It's one of the reasons why the document now has been changed to say municipal pollution prevention, to add that clarity. The class environmental assessment is really focused on what can be done from a municipal perspective. Pollution prevention is a key strategy that the master plan puts forward as part of all of the elements of the master plan, all 6. The first element of the recommended approach really deals with what the municipality can do in terms of preventing pollutants from being released. But as we talk about the source and conveyance controls going forward, pollution prevention is a critical element to all of those approaches, because we in the industry as well as the city has found that it is much more cost effective and is much more environmentally sustainable to prevent the pollutants from leaving a site than it is to try and contain them at the end. I think the comments was around pollution control. When we say the word control, we are talking about at the end of the system. We're trying to control something. Prevention is preventing it from happening in the first place.
Okay, and some of Mr. Jackson's comments were around what was the wording, but I think you've clarified for myself and hopefully Mr. Jackson is watching that you're doing something beforehand as opposed to controlling it once it goes down the pipe, so to speak.
Through the chair, we'll be able to expand on that as part of the source and conveyance controls as we go through the different approaches. But pollution prevention with all modern stormwater management is a central piece.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, just for number 1, again, the sediment removal, that's for those areas that don't have stormwater management ponds, right? And wouldn't it be prudent to do that across the city instead of having to clean up the stormwater ponds at a later point? And which one's more cheaper way of doing it?
Through the chair, we did a comprehensive analysis of sediment within catch basins on 4 different neighborhoods in the city that relate to new developments, everything to mature developments. We looked at the cost effectiveness of the city program for cleaning out ponds versus cleaning out individual catch basins. What we found is that there's a significant increase in costs to clean out the catch basins in areas where there is a stormwater management pond. It is more cost effective to clean it out all in one area at the pond. Okay. We do not have that luxury in areas without stormwater control, and therefore that's why it's recommended in those areas. Okay.
Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, can you help us understand what you mean by cleaning out a catch basin? Is it, I was picturing it's just clearing off the leaves from the top of it, but what I'm to understand, is it a 2-tier thing underneath the grate?
Through the chair, the catch basins in the city of Kitchener typically have sumps in them, which means that the pipe flowing out is set higher than the bottom of the catch basin. that provides an area for sediment to settle.
Yeah.
It's that material that we would be targeting. So it would be
Just
lifting
scoop
the
it in.
lid and a vacuum truck to remove the sediment that's accumulated in the catch basins.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you. The second element of the recommended approach is the source control and market strategies element. This is discussing, really focusing on what happens on individual properties. We did a considerable amount of market research for both Kitchener homeowners as well as businesses in the city as part of the social marketing market development elements. There are 3 reports in the class environmental assessment that looks at market-based strategies. And as part of the outcome, we have recommended, and the master plan puts forward as a recommended approach, that the city evaluate and determine the appropriateness of a variety of incentive programs to encourage residents and businesses to implement source controls on their properties. Some of these incentive programs may include financing options for individual properties, bonusing strategies, review enhancements, as well as service charge reductions. And the goal of this element is to achieve a 20% uptake over a 5-year period on individual properties. So to look at a residential property, we are looking to take or to encourage, incentivize a resident that has a yard that looks like this into something that may look like this. This particular yard, after the changeover, this landscape, although some might feel, I feel it is much more aesthetically pleasing, it also reduces runoff, it absorbs rainwater, improves water quality, and requires less irrigation than the turf element in the previous slide. On the business side, we're looking at how can we incentivize or encourage property owners to do something like this. This is a green roof. This is a lower podium. It is 3 stories tall, and there is a park just to the left of that photo. This particular roof would behave very similar to that park, to that grass area on the left. So how can we incentivize new developments in the City of Kitchener to implement something like this, a green roof, as part of new development? This is part of the market strategies approach. And really we're allowing the market to incentivize and encourage these individual businesses and property owners to take that up. So imagine, if you will, a resident who is having their driveway replaced, and the service provider says, would you like asphalt or have you considered permeable pavement? Would you like interlock or permeable interlock? So by providing the marketplace with the ability to influence the user and potentially get them to convert what would be a negative for the stormwater system to a positive as part of their works. And it's how do we do that? So with that, I'll take some questions on the recommended approach.
Councilor Gazzola?
Yeah, I wonder if you could just, I glanced away for a minute and you showed a property and the back, yeah, the one, yeah. Okay, so that's going from that to that, okay. There are a couple of questions here. You talk about in the report 2 areas in the city that are being dealt with through REAP or something. Where are those areas?
Through the chair, the 2 areas have not been determined yet. They will be prioritized as part of the implementation plan based on both need and opportunity. That funding came in fairly late in the process, but was very welcomed and dovetails very nicely into this element of the master plan.
Okay, that's fine. The other question I have is this whole area, we have 2 large groups that are exempt from our collection. We have churches and schools, and because they're exempt, I'm sure they don't have to look as closely to what they're doing. And is there any additional discussion at this time of perhaps removing that exemption? Is that all part of our master plan study?
Through the chair, there has been no discussions about removing that exemption, but what we have found, this particular transformation is actually in a pilot area of Clarkson, which is in Mississauga. This was done as part of a market-based strategies approach for residential. What we have found throughout Ontario is where a strategy has been piloted and implemented, schools and churches are one of the first adopters. They have a very engaged group, and it dovetails very nicely with educational programs. So we have had a lot of success using a market-based strategy to influence both schools and churches as part of other programs in Ontario.
Well, that's fine, but I'm going to put the question, just they don't have to answer it today, but are we considering or even looking at that issue of removing that exemption from those two areas.
Yeah, and the answer...
You don't have to answer that. Staff doesn't have to answer that. I just want to put it on the table.
Well, the answer is currently no. There's no direction to staff or through this report that that's being addressed at all. So that would have to be a council directive at some point in time if we were looking to do that. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, just with that last point, more than an exemption with the school boards, I think it's more the refusal to pay and not really cooperating, in my opinion, but that's a frustrating issue that we have to continue dealing with. So with this, and Nick will attest to this, I continue to express my frustration and somewhat agitation as well whenever I see increased costs to, of course, the businesses and homeowners. And hopefully Nick knows it's coming from a good place, though. With this, I think this is excellent. The best way to ensure that we're being fair with the increased cost to mitigate all this, when it's not coming directly from a tax base, is when it's incentivized. So there is a cost recovery to the homeowner. So with the incentives, I think you slightly touched on it. Are we looking at best practices that are already being used, and are we trying to be forward-thinking with some approaches as well?
Through the chair, in terms of the individual practices, we are definitely moving at a pace that is, I think, leading the province in terms of what's out there. But we are very much in line with what the province has put out in February 2015 as the directive for stormwater. So we have intentionally developed the master plan to coincide with what the province is expecting. In terms of the market strategies component itself, I think what we found when we started this program was that the City of Kitchener was already quite far along in this element. And we've really just looked at how we could tweak that and amend it to get additional uptake, meaning more properties to participate in the credit program, which is the ultimate goal, is to get more stormwater controls.
And I agree, but with the current credit program, the way it's articulated, we still struggle to ensure that we have maximum uptake on that as well. I like the additional measures that could make it more feasible, where it makes it more attractive, but the master plan should also be reflected back on what we already have going for us and how do we improve that as well. Will that be done?
Yeah, through the chair, the master plan fully recognizes what's being done. The current program will remain, but then be enhanced. So we're focusing, the residential program will remain, and we're focusing on the master plan primarily on the industrial, commercial, institutional sectors, which is the area that is currently lacking in terms of uptake. It is also the areas with the largest roof areas and the largest impermeable surfaces. That is where we're focusing, as well as how can we influence new development, both infill in the urban core, where we currently have that gap. How can we encourage new developments to have stormwater controls? The shift in the market strategies is to really have the marketplace drive the uptake versus the city pushing. So this provides the seed, and the idea is that the market will then take over, and has been very successful as part of other jurisdictions. And for anyone who's interested, there is a jurisdictional scan report in the appendices that details all of the different municipalities in Ontario and Canada and the U.S. who have implemented these strategies and their successes.
Well, going forward, I encourage and complement this approach.
Councillor Fernandez?
So, Chris, you mentioned something about the province and the direction that the province is taking, and that we've at least started down that road. Can you give us a very brief idea of where that policy might be taking us? Is it significantly more stringent, or the expectations significantly more stringent than what we're doing now? And when is that going to be implemented?
Through the chair, a very brief synopsis. In February 2015, the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change put out basically an informational booklet. This small report memo provided direction of what the ministry is intending to do in terms of stormwater management. Subsequent to that, they released their request for proposal for a development of a new stormwater management manual for the province that would complement the existing one. The existing one deals with stormwater ponds, wetlands, dry ponds. This new guideline will look at low-impact development. So, like we see on the screen here, green roofs, rainwater harvesting, permeable pavers. And the province has indicated that they will be shifting from a flow-based control system to a volume-based control system. And what that means is they're looking to capture, clean, cool, and infiltrate stormwater as much as possible, encourage creative reuse of stormwater, as well as increasing evapotranspiration. What this all means is that low-impact development will be a requirement by the province, and there will be a volume requirement that will have to be contained on every site, and that's the direction that the ministry has put forward. That is intended to be released sometime in 2017. The master plan was intentionally developed to be parallel with that process, so that the master plan would be would require only minor modifications or at least adaptations when the ministry came out with the new or the ultimate volume targets.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Davey.
So just one point of clarification on that then. So if the province is going to essentially legislate volume requirements, why would we need to explore incentives then?
Through the chair, the province will be looking at those from a retrofit, infill, new development perspective. The intent of the master plan is to deal with all of those things, but we're very cognizant that the policies and the implementation process should be developed as part of the Class EA process, so that when the province did legislate those, that city staff, policies, programs would be in place, and so that there would not be a lag in that implementation. So really, it's about being ready for the changes that are coming, and having everything in place for those changes.
Okay, but you're comfortable then that we're not going to be doing work that, again, creating incentive programs that ultimately end up being legislated by the province anyway? I guess that's my concern.
Through the chair, the province will not be legislating existing property owners to retrofit their properties.
Okay, so the incentives are purely for retrofit?
Correct.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, you may proceed to the next section, please.
Thank you. The third element is conveyance controls for roads. So in this part of the recommended approach, as part of capital roads reconstruction projects, and per the infiltration policy that has been developed in draft with the region of Waterloo, the city intends to implement linear stormwater systems located both adjacent and within the road right-of-way to encourage the infiltration of water, improve water quality, and reduce runoff. Again, we're trying to cool, clean, and infiltrate the water. So it could be something like this, which is a roadside bioretention facility, or some people may be more familiar with the term rain garden. This could be a perforated pipe, like we see here, which is a perforated pipe in a gravel jacket below grade. Or it could be a bioretention facility, which is exactly the same as the picture without picture on the left, without the vegetation. So the same practice, just with a turf cover on it. Different operation maintenance requirements, different aesthetics. Both of these provide water quality, quantity, and runoff control for the roadway. So how do we go from this street, an existing view, to an artist's rendition of what that may look like, to the implementation right after planting, to 1 year post? So this is the next spring of a roadside bioretention facility, and this treats the road runoff from that roadway, and there are no conventional stormwater catch basins and pipes within this roadway system. So we go from existing road to either a vegetated surface or a turf surface, but all of which provide stormwater control as part of planned road projects. And I'll take questions on that element.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, so this part of it deals with new roads coming down the pike.
Through the chair, any road project in the city, we would look for opportunities to implement stormwater controls as part of that road project.
No, I appreciate it, but it's new roads, so this will get into our development charges down the road?
No, through the chair, it's part of the capital roads project that's planned, so it's any resurfacing or reconstruction project.
But how about for new projects? We're going to also obviously want to do this sort of thing right from the beginning, right?
Through the chair, back to the previous comment, is almost a certainty that the province will be legislating new roads would have stormwater controls in them.
And that will be part of our development charges. I'm looking for a nod, yes. Okay, the other question I have, we have how does this tie in to our accelerated plan? We're looking at here, I look at we're looking to spend between $2 and $13 million. So how does this tie into that?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, through the chair. So we looked at the next 203 road segments that are planned to be reconstructed. Roughly 100 of those are eligible to have this type of LID practice implemented, which would be an incremental cost increase to still gain from the economies of scale of the existing program and also have these roads retrofit to provide stormwater controls.
So has this expenditure been included in that program?
The expenditure that's forecast would be built into the program going forward based on part of the implementation plan, and the intention is to look at that through the 2017 budget process.
I'm not clear, though. So you've looked at this accelerated program. I forget the period that it's to cover, but is this included? And are we looking at additional funds for that?
So through the chair, this is an incremental cost increase to the existing program in most cases, and what we are doing as part of the implementation plan is looking at allocating the existing funding that has been that is dedicated to the stormwater utility and looking at how we proportion that to the different elements of the overall master plan program, this being one of those elements.
I'll ask you a different question then. You say that the existing funding, what existing funding do you have in place? We're looking at
Hans?
between 2 and 13 million. What do you have in place?
Through the chair, I'll try my best on this one. The accelerated infrastructure program has currently has a 10-year capital forecast, so that's in place. The additional stormwater work that we're talking about now to help to contain water within those roads is not currently included in that accelerated infrastructure program funding. So what we have is the amount of money that is being collected through the stormwater utility will be reapportioned to address a number of the programs that we're talking about here.
Okay, I'll save you time. You've said no, you don't have the money there now. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Oh, thank you. The one picture you showed, Chris, where, yes, there, I thought you said that this would allow us not to have a storm drain, but I see a storm drain in the bottom picture on the right. And I'm assuming that little dip on the left is the same in the left picture. But what I'm understanding is that before the water reaches the storm drain, it will have cooled and it would have clarified a little bit. Is that?
Through the chair, the picture on the right that you see is the downstream end. So the piping would tie into that downstream catch basin, but the treatment would happen upstream of that. The picture on the left is mid-block. It also has a collection point at the end of the street. So what we're doing is before the water reaches the outlet, we're cleaning it, cooling it, we're removing as much volume as possible. And when we discharge it, we have done all of our requirements according to the ministry in terms of water quality. We've also reduced our volumes, so reduced urban flooding, we've reduced erosion, and we've put water back into the ground where we can, where we're not constrained.
So a storm like we had last night, which it came down in buckets, I don't know if it did where you live, but it did around our area. In a situation like picture right and left, instead of seeing the water rushing down the street and dumping into a storm drain, hopefully this would capture at least a portion of that rainwater, whatever percentage, I'm not sure what that would be, before it got to the storm drain. And then and what often happens when we have a rainfall like that, the storm drains start to overflow. Is that what this is going to do?
Through the chair, I will just focus on this photo right here. This is actually in Mississauga. It's Ontario's first Green Street. The intent of this control is really for water quality, erosion, infiltration, but they are, in essence, very small stormwater ponds located adjacent to the roadway. They do provide some storage both below the ground and at the surface. This particular street, the two streets that we reconstructed, were hit by the 2013 storms in Mississauga. This is just outside the Streetsville area. The streets, and there's a monitoring report that is available for anyone who's interested. The two streets that were retrofitted had one report of basement flooding on a new build. The other streets, which have both ditches and storm sewers, experienced significant basement flooding. This is not, the intent is not to prevent flooding, but it does provide a benefit, which is why when we look at climate change strategies coming from both the ministry as well as other jurisdictions, low impact development as part of a climate change mitigation strategy is almost always synonymous with each other, because there is a volume that's removed and a release that happens later. Therefore, the storm sewer has now cleared and there's capacity. So there is a significant benefit, but not the primary focus.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Ioannidis?
My question was related to where was this, and you just said it all, so thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks. You can proceed to the next section, please.
Thank you. Stormwater management facilities is the next element of the recommended approach. This is intended to manage the city's existing stormwater facilities and maintain their effectiveness, as well as new facilities. So the city intends to remove sediment from 16 dry facilities and 27 wet facilities within the city, to retrofit 10 previously identified stormwater management facilities, and I'll show you an example of that, as well as to construct 12 new stormwater management facilities as part of park rehabilitations. So sediment removal, fairly straightforward, legislative requirement. In terms of the retrofits, this is an example. This is near Maple in the city of Kitchener. This is Pond 4. This is a dry pond before the retrofit, and this is the wet pond that was constructed after the retrofit. So we've taken a facility that only provided flood control and maintained that flood control, but have also provided water quality, erosion, as well as some amenities as part of that retrofit. So there's 10 of these types of retrofits planned for the city. In terms of an example of a new stormwater management facility as part of a park rehabilitation, this is in Toronto. The picture on the left is the before. The red dashed line is the area that we're going to see in the after. And that angled portion that you see there is a concrete line channel that was previously in that area. This is after the retrofit and park rehabilitation. This rehabilitation includes trails, significant plantings. It has the stormwater pond integrated. What you see here is a children's splash pad or playground area integrated into that redevelopment, as well as there's a soccer field to the right, and below that soccer field is a subsurface storage facility. The recommended approach for these 12 new facilities includes both surface, subsurface, and combinations thereof based on the individual opportunities. This is a very successful retrofit for the City of Toronto. It's been used as an example all over the province. And I will take questions on that element.
Councillor Ioannidis?
Mine's back to the queue.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola?
Just out of curiosity, what did that Toronto project cost?
That project was about $9 million. It controls a significant area of the city. And then as well, it was identified as an area for a park rehabilitation for both amenities as well as crime prevention. So multiple benefits from that facility, and it was one of those great projects where all those elements came together and we had a wonderful result.
That's good. Just a question to staff. We're looking in this topic. We're looking between $30 and $40 million that we need. Where is that money coming from? Do we have it now, or do we have it planned?
Through the chair, you will see this later on the financial slide, but the intention and the way that the implementation plan will be developed is to look at the existing stormwater user rates that are being charged on an annual basis, and this plan is really about using the existing funding that's available and applying it to these different elements within the master plan. So we are not looking to request for additional rate increases based on what this master plan is putting forward.
Okay, that was a question I was going to have. You have planned, I don't know, for the next, 10, 15 years, a 9.2% annual increase in stormwater rates. And that, my question was going to be, will that cover everything that you have on the plate on table 4 on pages 819 and 820.
Yes, through the chair, that's the intention.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Just quickly, the spill that we recently, and this was a discussion at the Environmental Committee too, the recent spill that we went through, has that elevated those kind of outlets to a higher, because you've got 7 were assessed as higher priority. Has that elevated those kind of outlets to a higher priority?
Through the chair, any drainage area or catchment area that leads to an uncontrolled outlet in the city has a higher priority than an area that already has stormwater control because of those issues and everything else. So those are included in when we showed the pictures of the existing conditions for stormwater. Those areas scored lower because they have no control, so the outlet goes directly. So it encompasses spills prevention as well as stormwater control, erosion control, the other objectives of the master plan.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I was going to touch on the financial side a bit later, but Councillor Gazzola jumped in, so I may as well get it out of the way at the
Is it
same
to do with this section?
Well, it was stemming from Councillor Gazzola's comments,
Okay, go
but
ahead.
if there's...
I think there's a section later that we're talking about the financial piece of things. but-
Okay. Yeah, so I guess, again, in terms of flow of this too, then it
Go
might
ahead.
be... No, it's okay. I'll hold off.
Okay. Then you may proceed to the next section, please.
Thank you. In terms of the second to last element of the Stormwater Master Plan recommended approach, we have a streams and erosion section in the master plan. So this element is very specific to the individual water courses because, as you can see in these photos, we have the same water course with extremely different conditions. We have a very naturalized picture on the left. We have a straightened section with gabion baskets in the middle and a rehabilitated section on the right. So the master plan is not general, it is very specific to those water courses and the individual elements. It's also sensitive to different types of water courses in the city. So this is in the downtown core. We have a very vertical wall system, concrete. We have very good riparian cover and shading in this very naturalized section of Detweiler. And then, of course, when we look at North Strasbourg, here we have a extreme headwaters wetland features. So the master plan acknowledges all of these, as well as the issues that were identified. So all of the water courses in the city of Kitchener were examined through the master plan, through a detailed assessment done by a fluviogeomorphologist who walked every water course and found issues like this, with erosion of a pedestrian walkway, cycling trail. This is a bank failure, undercutting of the banks due to excessive flows. Could be a maintenance issue, which was also identified as part of these site walks. Or it could be something like this, which is actually exposed infrastructure. So this is, the bank is actually migrating into some infrastructure, in this case a water main. So in terms of the recommended approach, following the detailed stream erosion assessment, in order to improve the environmental form and function of the water courses, the city intends to undertake restoration of both individual erosion sites, which would look something like this, so a smaller scale repair of an erosion site, or of a stream reach itself. An example of a stream reach, just for a visual, would be something like this, like Phil Singer Park. So an existing concrete line channel. This is during construction, and this is after construction. So the restoration reaches can be a combination of individual erosion sites that are very close together, or it can be a section of water course that has been deemed appropriate to restore that entire area for both economies of scale as well as function. And so the master plan includes both of those elements as part of the recommended approach. I'll be happy to take questions on that element.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 814 of our report, there's a footnote that indicates the need for land rights acquisition for Stonegate Hofstadter Creek for remedial work. Do we have those rights worked out, or do we have an alternate access point?
Nick?
Yes, through the chair, we do have actually access to that individual site from not from Hofstadter Avenue, but from Stonegate Drive.
Okay, thank you. And would there be instances where the design of this remedial work could involve community engagement to ensure that the final solution addresses the needs and wants of the neighbors?
Through the chair, as part of the implementation plan and the implementation of all the recommended approaches, the city would undertake a general process of public consultation and detailed design going forward. So it is the intent of the master plan that public consultation would be part of those works going forward.
Okay, thank you. And I also did want to point out in the report about the engagement process on page 821, there was a high level of positive support for the recommended approaches that are in this report, and also for staff being helpful for answering questions and keeping them informed. And I also wanted to thank Mr. Golan for, while on his vacation, spending over an hour on the phone with a resident in my ward regarding Stonegate Hofstadter Creek. So thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, more for number 2, restoration of stream reaches, and I'm glad you showed an example of what was done at Fesslinger Park. And I can see environmentally that's probably the best effort to do, and through previous reports I realized why that's done as well. Is there a way for us to be able to, because again, the measures that need to be implemented for the master plan to mitigate for stormwater management are considerable. So are there areas that we can try to limit costs to do in shorter span, some efforts, or again, referring back to Fesslinger Park, break up the concrete in smaller gaps. So there's, small, that provides a kind of a obstruction for, the stream overflow, especially when you have large storms happening. Again, maybe it doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing, but again, the costs are probably far more limiting. Do we consider that too, or do we just go for what's the, not necessarily the most costly way, but ultimately ends up being that way? But I'll let you answer the question. So,
through the chair, the restoration of stream reaches and the assessment that was done was based on, it was a risk-based formula, which looked at risk to infrastructure, private property, and there was a very detailed process that was developed with city staff. The reaches that have been put forward are all reaches that have a risk that was identified. So although there are environmental benefits, they're also addressing significant risks to the public and or infrastructure going forward. The master plan, although we're presenting them as individual elements, they are not in isolation. So what we can do in terms of source controls to get residents to improve their stormwater management will reduce the requirement for additional erosion site restorations going forward. So the more we can do on the land surface as part of our roads projects, private property, stormwater ponds, the less we'll have to do in the water courses. This element of the master plan is actually a good news story in that in terms of the length of total water course in City of Kitchener, this was a much smaller budget line than we would see in many major municipalities in Ontario. You would see costs that would be 3 to 4 times this cost for a municipality of this size for erosion restoration works, which
just
means
because we don't have that many, concrete streamlines, or we did it better effectively?
To clarify, for the Fesslinger Park is just an example of what a restoration reach would look like. The intent is not for the master plan to remove concrete that is not does not have any failure, imminent failure related to it. So we're really looking at water courses like we showed where there's an exposed water main or sanitary sewer in proximity, things like that that are really looked at. That was really just a visual. I
think you explained effectively answered my question. It's only imminent failure that we're really focusing on.
Risk-based strategy, absolutely.
Thank you.
You may proceed to the last section, please.
The final element is the storm sewer infrastructure. As part of the master plan, we developed a storm sewer, a trunk sewer model. This is of storm sewers that are 600 millimeters in diameter and larger, which is approximately 6,000 pipes, or about 33% of the total system. This is a calibrated model. Monitoring was done for 1 year in the city's storm sewers. And this is the base model for future expansions of the stormwater system to understand how it functions. We looked at 5 scenarios as part of the master plan, everything from existing conditions to applying LID volume controls, as well as climate change. And just to give you an example, again, there is a detailed report. This is existing conditions, and we're just focus on this area here. The dots that we can see are known flood locations. The red lines are the trunk sewer system that are surcharging, which means that water has now is coming out of the catch basin onto the road surface. And the orange are storm sewer or trunk systems that are at capacity, meaning that they are completely full. So this corresponds very well in existing conditions, the model, to what we would expect to see. And when we look at climate change in that same area, you can see we have increased both surcharging and pipes at capacity. So this is just one of the scenarios that we looked at as part of the master plan to identify storm sewer infrastructure issues. Following the development of that trunk sewer model, the city intends to expand that network in areas identified for future study. So as part of the master plan implementation report, we will be identifying areas for further study to look at the pipes that are smaller than 600 millimeters going upstream into those areas and to evaluate and prioritize remedial works within those areas. So we've set up the basic model to then expand on for the storm sewer system. So as part of the recommended approach, the city will be expanding that network and identifying areas, and then as well, the developing volume targets for the city of Kitchener to mitigate those climate change impacts. And I'll take questions.
Okay, Councillor Griswold.
Yeah, it's really a question of staff. A number of years ago, I can remember us having bad rains in the summer, and we were running into 50 and 75 and 100-year storms. Have we had any of those in recent years?
Sorry, Nick?
Yeah, through the chair, probably the best example that I can think of off the top of my mind was the storm that washed over Hidden Valley Road and caused that failure there and the flooding at Fairview Mall at the same time. So what we are seeing, just to provide additional context, is we're seeing intense storms in very localized areas. So different parts of the city may experience storms differently. And so when we looked at this model, we looked at all the locations where we have constraint in our infrastructure.
Okay, that's good. I wonder if we would mind just taking a look on page 816. I'd like to try to understand table 3. Could you just go across a scenario 1 and just explain it a little more fully? Or I didn't quite understand what it means.
Through the chair, the 5 scenarios we looked at, starting at the top, scenario 1 is the existing storm sewer system in the city of Kitchener, and these are the trunk sewers. So we looked at the full length or percentage of the system that is surcharging, water reaching the surface, as well as the capacity. So the existing condition is the baseline. This is what currently exists in the city of Kitchener. The climate change takes the localized climate change predictions.
No, I can appreciate those. Could you just go across the first line and explain what does the pipe...
Certainly.
Yeah. I understand your different alternatives. Yeah. Okay.
So out of the 33% of the system in the first line, we have about 10,000 meters of pipe that is at capacity. So that means that the pipe is completely full of water and will not convey any more. So 4.8% of the 33% that was modeled, or the 6,000 pipes, are currently at capacity in the existing condition. We have about just over 13,000 meters.
So if 5% are at capacity,
that's right.
Does that mean 95% are below capacity?
95% have capacity, correct.
Have capacity, okay, yes.
Yes, of the 6,000 pipes.
Okay.
For the surcharge, we have just over 13,500 meters where the water is now, pipe is at capacity and it is reaching the surface of the road. So it's coming back out of the catch basins. So we have, in addition to the 10,000 meters at capacity, we have an additional 13,000 meters plus that are surcharging. So this is a next level. So capacity is not good, but when you're surcharging, that is bad. That results in urban flooding. And so we have a total of about 24,000 meters of pipe out of the 6,000 pipes that are at surcharging capacity. Yeah, and that is only a 5-year storm. So just to be clear, as Mr. Golan just wanted me to mention, that is for the 5-year storm.
Which is a pretty minor storm.
It is the minor system,
yeah.
And therefore, yes, it is a minor storm.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just one question. What time frame is the climate change model in this slide?
So the climate change, the prediction is in the 2050-2080 range for the ultimate conditions. We use that as part of the localized predictions that were developed by the University of Waterloo, which the City of Kitchener was a partner in that study, and we applied those increases. And that time frame is appropriate for when we look at the ultimate achievement of, say, across the city volume controls. We determined that would be a very appropriate long-term vision for the city to implement those.
And that model, did it take into account any other changes, or if everything stayed exactly the same with just climate change?
One of the scenarios also looked at intensification. So it looked at areas currently slated for intensification in the city and what the impacts of those would be. We looked at a various combination.
So that would increase that, so that would be added load, which is also figured into this model.
I'm sorry?
That would be added load then, which is figured into this model.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's added load.
Mayor Verbenovic?
Thank you. So just, I guess, further to the questions that Councillor Gazzola was asking, our current model then is built on, what, a 2-year or a 5-year storm, like our current storm system?
Through the chair, it can run all events all the way up to the 100-year, but what we are looking at is the minor system. So we're modeling the minor collection system, which is the pipe system. The current standard is a 5-year. So what we're looking to identify is areas of the city that we are not providing the level of service that we should be based on the current standards of the City of Kitchener. So the model can do all events. This table is reporting the 5-year event, which is the current standard.
So you're saying our standard is 5 and there's places that aren't meeting the 5?
Correct.
So that are built on a 2-year or whatever model?
Or it was built on the 5 and no longer has the capacity.
Okay, and so, I mean, overall, should we be moving everything to like a 10-year model or something based on what's happening with climate change?
Through the chair, the recommendations coming out of the Ministry of Environment and other agencies is to diversify the stormwater system. So to not just rely on pipes and just larger pipes or bigger ponds, but to diversify that infrastructure to include things like low impact development, to have residents control stormwater on their property. It is much more cost effective and much more effective in terms of flood mitigation to do the whole suite versus just increase pipe size.
Right.
We then increase pipe size, we end up with more erosion, we're spending money repairing water courses. So it's a balancing act of providing increased capacity where we need to, but a blanket increase is not necessarily appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions. You proceed.
In terms of next steps, so the report will go to Council in June 2016, followed by the filing of a 30-day public review. All the documents have been posted on the website, and then the implementation plan will be developed over the summer months. The implementation plan will cover the prioritization of all the works that have been identified. So the 6 elements will be prioritized on a sub-watershed basis based on both need and opportunity. So the watersheds that are in the most need and where we have the most opportunity will be higher priority, and therefore the best expenditure of those dollars. It will recommend funding allocations for those projects over the time frame of the master plan. It will also develop policy to allow the implementation plan to go forward. In addition, we will be developing market-based approaches to increase that participation and uptake of the stormwater credit policy. A strategic alignment between the stormwater utility and operations will also be discussed, and recommendations for staffing and resource requirements to implement the stormwater master plan. In terms of the financial, the implementation plan will be based on the existing 9.2% expected annual stormwater rate increase over the next 10 years, but will not add to the projected increase. So it's how do we better spend the projected and allocated funding as we move forward on areas with the most need. So as a summary, what you have in the report are the different program elements, and in total, the project cost for the master plan ranges between $100 and $127 million over that time period to implement all the approaches that are detailed in the master plan. So we have 3 recommendations. Should we pause here? 3 recommendations going forward. That Council approve the City of Kitchener Integrated Stormwater Master Plan, Schedule B, Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, with the report, together with the recommendations, and that staff be directed to file the report for the 30-day public review period as required under the Act, and further that staff be directed to develop the implementation plan with an operation maintenance strategy, resource requirement, and supporting policies and bylaws as set out in the attached report. And with that, I will take questions as well.
Perfect. So we'll open it up to general questions, and I do remind you that the implementation plan will get us into the detail, so try to stay away from those types of questions. But with that, we have a number of people in the queue. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Danik had answered where the implementation and the projects that I wanted to ask a question for Storm upon. So with that, I think I'm prepared to move the recommendations at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. On the financial side, it's not entirely clear. So has the federal infrastructure incentive program, has that been figured into this funding yet?
Nick?
Yeah, through the chair. It's indeterminate at this point exactly how much funding we may ultimately be eligible for, especially for stormwater projects, although it is expected that there will be some funding available, which will help us with our backlog of projects and shelf-ready work that's already ready to go but unfunded.
Okay, so I guess two parts to that question. Number one, would you need direction from committee at some point then, I guess? Because I think that we're with a 9.2% projection per year, that's very high. And that's something that I was out there supporting publicly last budget. I can't necessarily say, I don't know what the conditions of the economy and everything else would be going forward. Is it something that could be accommodated, that any incentives that come from the federal government goes to reduce that 9.2%? Because my concern is it will go to additional works.
Hans?
Through the chair, the intent is that we arrange our program around the projected funding of 9.2% annually. Should we receive additional grant dollars, obviously council may make a decision to either lower the rate increase for the year or to add work which is shelf ready, such as cleaning out storm water ponds, catch basins, other projects that are on the list, recognizing that the cost estimates that we've come up with are just that. They are cost estimates. And they're based on 2016 costs. And as we know, costs will increase. So therefore, I think as funding becomes available, I think those are the decision points and time points where we need to make those decisions.
But all of those will come back to committee or council to decide upon?
I believe should funding be made available, that would be a direction that would be provided, yes.
Okay, and I'm not going to make any motion, but I have to ask the question. Since we're preparing the master plan, and since the master plan does anticipate a 9.2% increase each year for the next 10 years, is this an appropriate time to ask that there be priority set to funding? So, for example, I don't want to have a master plan come back without an unforeseen event that says that council can approve 9.2% in some future year. So can there be a priority level set within the master plan saying this is the work we absolutely need to get done, this is most important, this, some of the stuff that we've seen has been more aesthetic, for example. So can we structure it in a way that if there is a worst case scenario that we can't afford to raise the rates that amount, that's built into the master plan?
Through the chair, the implementation plan will lay out and will prioritize all of the work necessary within those 6 areas. Obviously, you've got one large bucket of money every year, depending on the increase. That bucket of money has to be divided among the 6 areas. Those 6 areas need to be prioritized in terms of risk and in terms of legislated requirements and in terms of the programs that we have in place right now, such as the Accelerated Infrastructure Replacement Program. So money will need to be put forward to the various programs based on the program we have ongoing, legislated requirements, and need risks. There may be depending on the costs involved, or depending on if council feels that the rate increase is too high, there may be years where we cannot get all of the work done that is anticipated. But again, that's a year-to-year review of how we move forward.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we'll approve it every budget, and if there was, only a 5% increase, then staff would come forward and say this project, and this project aren't going to move forward if you only approve 5%. So I think there's that assurance there. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, a number of my questions have been answered, and it all deals with going forward. I mean, your recommendations here, they're very logical. There's not much thinking to do. My concern, and you answered it earlier, that all other things being equal, with the 9.2% annual increase that you've approved, which I didn't go along with, but that will cover, and you're going to come back with an implementation plan. Now, my concern is, there are two things. If we do get outside funding, it's something that this council will look at, and we will have a choice to make. Do we put it here? Do we put it there? My concern is that right now, and it's a good, excellent study. You have a good. You've got a good book full of all of the work that needs to be done, and that's going to come back in an implementation plan. But I'm looking at it with a skeptical eye and saying, well, you've got everything, including the kitchen sink, in your shopping cart. Now, what can we do to try to prioritize things that really need to be done? And is there a way of telling if something is done, it costs us this, but it saves us this on the other side? I don't have, I'm sure your list is going to be complete, but will you be able to come back with some tools to assist council in prioritizing what goes ahead?
Through the chair, the implementation plan will assist in doing that. As I said before, the implementation plan will look at those things that we have to do, that are legislated, that are part of our ongoing programs. As we move down the list in the 6 elements, certainly there are opportunities for council to weigh in, to suggest, give direction as you may wish, to spend money, whether it's in this area or that area. The implementation plan will be coming back to this council later in the fall, and it will include decision-making tools, if you will, mini business cases for either going in one direction or the other.
And just to clarify, when I first asked, this is a 15-year plan, so your implementation will come back as a 15-year plan?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
I don't want to repeat what Councillor Gazzola said, because I think you've already said that there are, Hans, you said 3 areas that we will be looking at. So I wrote down needs risk, but there were 2 with the previous answer, I think 2 legislated.
Through the chair, if I may, there's the Accelerated Infrastructure Replacement Program,
yep,
which is funded from the storm utility. So that's one. Okay. There's the legislated requirements, which is the cleaning out of stormwater ponds, catch basins. That's number 2. And then the next area is the what was the third one?
I thought I'd written down needs risk.
The water courses, the risk on the water courses. So we're initially just now talking about, how do we see prioritizing those 6 elements? And really, you need to prioritize them based on the have-to-dos and then what comes at the end. So that'll be part of the implementation plan to recommend how staff sees the prioritization and the programs and the projects within that.
Okay. And the turnaround, I guess, was when Councillor Gazzola was talking about, we'll do this because we'll see this as the benefit. Sometimes we can save money on it. We'll see that in the implementation part.
Through the chair, as Mr. Danik said, that if you spend money on implementing, let's say, rain trenches in reconstructed roads, there's a benefit downstream. In some cases, that can be quantified. In other cases, it's not so easy to quantify, but we'll do our best to try to give you the pluses and minuses.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to be careful not to reiterate some of the same concerns that are already outlined by Councillor Davey and Councillor Gazzola. My only suggestion would be, and you can clarify, I hear you that going forward through subsequent budgets, we will have an opportunity to weigh in to reprioritize projects. But should not the master plan better articulate what is a legislated requirement so we have no opportunity to deviate from it, and what is something that is good practice to do, and that prioritize it accordingly? Or does it do that already?
Nick?
Yes, through the chair, I think it's important to look at the master plan as a strategic vision for the city with respect to how stormwater management will be approached over the next 15 years. And when we get into the details of the implementation plan, what must be done, what would be nice to be done, and then the annual budget process, that's when the real decisions will get made as far as what project proceeds on an annual basis. So at this point, I would just take it a step back and say that this is a strategic vision for stormwater management and the approach that the City of Kitchener will take, and there will be checks and balances in place through the implementation plan development and annual budget process to still have control over which projects ultimately proceed.
I realize that, and that's always within our control, but my concern lies, again, ultimately the argument is consistent, and I try to appreciate it and try to recognize it when staff put it forward, that it was already approved by council by the way of master plan. So in effect, we have committed to a larger body of work, and I'm not saying that this is not, we have to show what ultimately the largest strategic plan, what it needs to be, but within the document, what issue is there to articulate those priorities?
Through the chair, if I may.
What absolutely has to be done, we have no way of not meeting our responsibility. What good things are because they will add costs later on. What are good practices other communities are doing? These are something we should do, and perhaps we necessarily don't have to do it more immediate.
Through the chair, the master plan, the projects that you see in the 6 elements of the master plan are specific identified projects. Each project in the implementation plan will be put into a year based on an assumed budget. If that budget is not available, project will get pushed to the next year. That's the reality of that situation. But in terms of what's required, the master plan does lay out where in individual technical reports as well as the master plan, which elements are required from a legislative perspective. For instance, cleanouts of ponds, dry ponds, oil and grit separators are detailed in the master plan, that there is a requirement by the City of Kitchener to do those per the environmental compliance approvals issued by the MOECC.
I hear you, but we're outlining a body of work consistent to a 9% increase. And this council, I'm not sure if you had to take that vote on today, we would be able to prove that.
Through the chair,
then why attach that component?
So through the chair, the costs that we outline here are the whole costs for everything. The implementation plan will slot those into years based on an assumption. But again, as Nick and Hans have detailed, as those years progress, if funding is not available, less work will get done. So this is the total cost to do everything in the master plan in 2016 dollars. The implementation plan will slot those based on opportunities and priorities going forward. If less funding is available, less work will get done. If infrastructure money comes into the city, then there's a process to potentially accelerate or reallocate.
Your time's way up.
Can I ring back in?
You can cue back in. Mayor Verbanovic?
Thank you, and I get the questions and the concerns around the implementation of this and the budget piece, and I'm glad to hear that we're looking at identifying what's required from a legislative point of view, and then sort of prioritizing beyond that in terms of high risk, medium risk, and so on. Did I understand correctly that as part of that, and I'm not sure how you would account for it, but are we going to be looking at future cost avoidance as well, or investments that we make that might minimize insurance claims? And I don't know exactly how you would look at that, but I think it's part of the work that, quite frankly, the Insurance Bureau of Canada, I know, has been starting to do with FCM, to start looking at some of this work, because the insurance industry, quite frankly, wants to see municipalities tackling some of this stuff and have that factor into some of their decision making.
Nick?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Well, so, okay, let me give you an example. I guess what I'm getting at specifically is, you could have a situation where we're making a $5 million investment, but it will reduce our insurance premiums by, $500,000 a year in perpetuity. So over 10 years, you're paying it back. Is that going to somehow factor into the modeling that you're doing from a financial point of view?
Yes, through the chair. So again, we're taking a 15-year look into the future, and for sure, we are taking a risk-based approach, which has been described, and circumstances will surely change between now and 15 years from now, and there needs to be a level of adaptability and flexibility, sort of an adaptive management approach is what we call it, built into the plan. And so we are continuously looking at, okay, what have we done this year? What are we doing next year? What were the benefits of the work we've previously conducted? And what are we dealing with going forward? And just an example that's very relevant to this current presentation is, as Mr. Denick alluded to, our watercourse and erosion restoration line item is 3 to 4 times less than what some other municipalities would see. And I would say that part of the reason for that is because of all the work that we've already done.
Okay, that's certainly good to hear. And then the other piece that I would just ask that be included as you're looking at this operational plan is what's going to be either what's announced or what might be happening in terms of both infrastructure dollars and traditional infrastructure dollars, as well as some of the additional funding that went to FCM that will be distributed for specifically climate change mitigation and adaptation.
Okay. Councillor Singh.
Yeah. So carrying on, how we will approach in prioritizing all this and ensuring that we try to meet best what's outlined through the master plan. So through the budget process, will that at least be better explained through reporting that if a certain percentage increase is being recommended, that meeting our legislative requirements, no matter what, we still have to increase by this percent? Then going forward, what is the right practices, and then good things to have? Will it be reported that way, at least for more clarity for council to determine? Because it's very difficult for us to make decisions on the fly, especially around budget. And going forward, I know this is something different, Madam Chair, but I want to make sure that the staff recognize the difficulty that council has sometimes in determining, based on the staff recommendation, taking the right course with limited information.
Through the chair, the fact is that we are not in compliance right now with some of the stormwater ponds that should be cleaned out. We're behind, simply from a workload, from a funding point of view. So that may in fact be that way for a while. The best we can do is we can try to set up the legislated and the AIRP program funding based on the anticipated increases. And if those anticipated increases in the stormwater utility do not come through, then obviously something has to drop out.
Okay, I think that would be a better approach. Thank you for that. And I don't think this point is lost on council. I want to repeat it again, though. With this new enterprise, our average taxpayer pays to the city about $1,000. Others goes to the region and the school board. An average homeowner pays approximately now $150 for stormwater management costs. That's almost close to 15% of what they pay in taxes. This is very costly, and it will only increase as going forward. And that's one of the reasons why we have to struggle in making sure meeting our responsibility, but we're being sustainable and fair to our residents in Kitchener as well.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just following up on that, just in closing, I want to be clear. Like,
are these comments?
Sorry, are we in comments?
Nope.
Oh, sorry. Comment then.
Sorry. Councillor Singh made a comment at the tail end of his question, so I'm assuming he won't be making any more comments. Councillor Gazzola, is yours a comment or a question? Okay, then we can. This has been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. So that's all the questions that we have for you and for staff. I'm going to shut us down to 2 minutes now for comments. We are an hour and 15 minutes over. We have 2 delegations who have been waiting, so we need to move on. And again, remember, this isn't about a rate. This is about the vision of the Stormwater Management Master Plan, and that the implementation plan is definitely going to generate a lot of discussion in the fall. So with that, Councillor Davey, you are first.
Thank you. At first, I want to acknowledge the work. Thanks, Chris and Nick and Hans as well. I want to be clear that I think I can speak for myself. Certainly, I recognize this work is very, very important. We live in a community that drinks our groundwater, and we drink the water from the Grand River, and we need to make sure that we're good stewards of that. I think there's staff's a lot of questions and concerns because, to be honest, we're always going to have difficulty accepting rate increases that are this far away from inflation. So it's our job, frankly, to ask these difficult questions and make sure that we're doing what is required at this point. But then by the same token, as at the last budget, many of us were out there facing the public and the media defending this body of work. So I just want to be clear on that point, that we ask the difficult questions here, we have to understand it, and then once we realize it, we will defend it when the time comes. Pardon me.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I want to compliment staff for a job well done. Although I've not always been on side with staff over the years, been 10, 15 years, staff have come out with some very good policies, and I think as a result the City of Kitchener is in a good place. I fully will support this because I appreciate it's a vision. It's trying to put all the pieces together as to where we have to go down the road the next 15 years. I've been opposed to the high annual increases, but in fact, and I appreciate that this is in terms of $2016, and that will impact us going down the road. And there's no doubt that things will arise that we don't. I think you have a fairly formidable list now, but there will be things that come forward that aren't on your list. The point of it is that we're approving the process going down the road, and we will actually have an opportunity every year as we approve our budgets as to what's on the list, how it's going to help us, and where we're going forward. So this is really just approving the base, approving for staff to come back with what I will call a full shopping basket, including the kitchen sink. There's nothing wrong with that. It will have as much of it in it as you can, but there is lots of opportunity in the next 15 years to look at it every year so that it fits in with what we and our constituents can afford. So I will support this. Thank you. I'll ask for a recorded vote because I think it is an important plan.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
So First, I wanted to thank both Nick and Chris for making the presentation the way we did it at Environmental Committee. I think it allowed for questions to be succinct about what particular issues we may have been concerned about. And I really appreciate you asking me about that and moving that forward for today. A lot of people still see this, our stormwater fee, as a rain tax. But when we look at some of the differences it makes, and hearing again that our stream restoration, that we're a little bit ahead of the curve, that helps make the case, I think, for working on this master plan. We see a lot of master plans come through here. I hope that this isn't going to get shelved somewhere, because I think you do have a really good implementation plan. You're talking about 15 years. You've got a budget attached to it, which is often we don't have for a master plan. So I think that's really critical to the work that's going to happen. It's also critical to making sure that we safeguard our existing streams and improve those that have degraded due to development impacts, and improving the water quality for our drinking, for our residents now and for our residents in the future. So I look forward to the implementation. I think there will be a significant amount of discussion around that as well. But I trust that all the work that has been done by Chris and your team and Nick and your team will make this a successful master plan. Thank you.
Mayor Verbanovic.
Thank you very much. I too will be supporting this and want to thank both staff and the consultants that have worked with us on developing what clearly is a comprehensive plan. The reality is, we're well regarded, both not only across Ontario but across the country for the leadership we've shown with respect to stormwater and with respect to our stormwater utility. I had an opportunity to speak at a water conference in Toronto a week or two ago, and people were quite impressed with what we have done as a city in this regard. This obviously lays the foundation in terms of what needs to be done going forward, and as Councillor Gazzola said, including the kitchen sink. And as we go through the implementation plan and the budget associated with it, we'll need to make some decisions and ultimately decide what is the right amount going forward to both be charged and invested in terms of the work that needs to be done, both from a sustainability point of view, but also from a climate change and adaptation point of view, in terms of the new realities that communities like ours are facing.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Even though we are heavily regarded with regards to our stormwater policy, to me, I think is startling is when we see 75% of our municipality doesn't have stormwater measures. I think it's good to see that we have this plan, because even though there is cost associated, there is a big lack with regards to our stormwater needs, and this plan will help tackle that and it does set a plan forward for that. With the costs, we'll have to balance that with all the other needs that we have, and that's what our job is here at committee and at council. But I was glad to see that we have incentives and some bonusing there, and I think those are important for the private sector to take a hold of this, and without that, I think we may have some issues. But again, I think overall, this is a great plan. I want to thank staff as well, and I saw the document. It's like almost 2 feet high, so it's a lot of material, and a lot of work. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll just quickly comment. I wanted to commend you on this report specifically. It was very easy to read and very easy to understand, so I thank you very much for that, because it can be a very complex issue to discuss. So I thought that was done very well. I very much support the vision for stormwater management moving forward. And like Chris said, I also, and through the questions that were asked, I look forward to the new regulations that are going to come down from the province with regards to new subdivisions, because I think that that's a really key piece that we can try and implement greater measures in the new subdivisions so we don't have to retrofit later on. So I'm excited to see those when they come. So a recorded vote has been called. Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was the last one. That's carried unanimously. So thank you very much, and we definitely look forward to the discussion around the implementation plan in a few months' time. With that, we are going to move on to, we have 2 noise exemptions. We thank you for your patience. We're going to start with the koi in the parking lot at Center in the Square. There's no presentation from staff, and I believe the delegation may have left. Yeah, I believe he was here. So, I have down for delegation Rob, Greg, and Chris. I'm not seeing any of them here. So with that, the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Questions of Gloria. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. So in consultation with the organizers, is there a reason why the stage placement of the second stage, the smaller one, is facing towards the residential neighborhood adjacent to Center in the Square rather than facing towards Frederick Street?
Gloria?
Through the chair, this was their suggestion that they do this. We have had some discussions around the concerns with the residential properties being down Margaret Street. It was their feeling that they would be able to comply with the noise levels, and with there's the church there that will absorb some of that sound, as well as an open field in behind it. So they were confident in speaking with their noise people that would not be an issue for the residents. They're also circulating a letter to all of the nearby residents, and the stage will be shut down by 5 o'clock.
Right, I did catch that.
Councillor Marsh, sorry, I'm cutting you off on purpose for a second.
Sure.
Can we actually change modes, because we do have a delegation for the other one, and come back to this one? Because I'd like to, these delegations have been sitting here since 9:30.
Yep.
So can we skip and change, what? Right, the delegation's left. So that's why I'm just thinking for everyone can shift modes and we can move into the Country Music Fest instead. And we would definitely, I have everyone in queue already who had queued in. Is everyone okay with that? Just to take, okay. So we're going to move into that one. Gloria doesn't have a presentation on that, but we do have delegation Jessica and Tiffany, if you want to come forward. And we appreciate your patience, and you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thanks, Gloria. Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors, and staff. I'm Jessica Lemon, and this is Tiffany T. from Lemon Entertainment. We're here to represent the CMT Music Fest. It's our first time here in Kitchener, and we are ecstatic to be here. We actually have 2 members on our management team from Kitchener, so we're really excited to produce an event in the city of Kitchener. Our festival report states that our potential attendance for this festival will be up to 25,000. As of last week, this has actually been reduced to 12,000 capacity per day. So our attendance is expected to be much lower. So since the report, we've actually reduced a lot of the audio equipment that we originally had planned for this event. We expect the audio and the music noise to be the biggest noise concern, but we also have machinery and traffic in place for the event at Bigman's. So we're just here to answer any questions that anyone might have on the event itself and our noise management plan.
Okay, there definitely are a few questions for you. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, actually, I have a question to staff. I'm just curious as to why you're downgrading the numbers that you expect.
Ticket sales.
And
Unfortunately, the ticket sales has been a little less for a first-year festival than was hoped for or expected. So we're at about 9,000 to 10,000 tickets sold this week. They're expecting that to increase a little bit over the final month, but we're putting in place just cost-saving measures for the festival. Originally, with 25,000 people, you need a little more audio output and stuff like that comes with quite the expense. So they've downsized.
Okay. The other question I have, I just wondered if staff could tell me, are any of the implications here any different than the other group that we just approved? What's the other group that was Ever After? Yeah. Is there anything different here than that?
Through the chair, the overall recommendations are similar. We just went back and did some more work with them in terms of the Sunday night that was brought up as a concern and how we were going to deal with that.
So it's an equal playing field?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Thanks for your patience, guys, and we're happy to have you in the community. I have a question looking at the map. Do you guys have that map? So I'm just about the stage orientation then. It's a little hard to make out, but it looks like there's a large square, that's the stage, and there's looks like a walkway coming out. Is the stage facing in the direction of that walkway?
That I think you're referring to the main stage in the center of the map?
Right.
It's not actually a walkway, it's just a barricade between the front of house where the mixing positions will be for the band and the main stage.
Okay.
And the stage itself does face southeast.
Faces southeast. Okay, so it is pointed, so it's not pointed outside the city then, it's pointed more towards, I guess, the Lackner area, but you're not from here, that's okay. At this point, are there still 2 stages planned?
2 stages, yes.
Still 2 stages planned. And do you know which direction the smaller second stage is pointing?
Yeah, just above it lists the locations. The other stage faces east.
Faces east. Okay, that one's fine. Okay, again, thank you kindly. And in relation to the other event that we're having coming up soon, I would very much like to thank you for not holding an event on the Sunday evening.
Councillor Marsh?
Hi, thanks for coming in, and thanks so much for your patience today.
Oh, no problem.
I saw you guys doing your other work up there, so.
Yeah, busy day.
Yes. I'm just curious about maybe it's a question of staff more than for you, I'm not sure, but regarding the placement of the stage, it does look like it is towards the residential neighborhoods. Do you have, is there an opportunity to make the stage, to learn from our lessons that we learned from through the Ever After festival and just maintain that type of lesson going forward so that we face the stage away from residential neighborhoods?
Gloria?
Answer that. Through the chair, I think with Ever After was the difference in the sound levels. You have a very bassy type music with Ever After, whereas we have had other events at Binghamans that have been directed this way, and we haven't had the same types of issues that we experienced with Ever After. So I think we'll do maybe a trial and error this time around and see how this works. If we do receive a lot of complaints, we may have to look at strategizing with further events that are planned, as well as Binghamans, and how we set up that stage location.
Just to add to, we also have a little bit of technology coming in with our sound system from what I understand to be the equipment that the other festival is using. We've been kind of planning together. And what that is it's a technology that helps with bass cancellation, which is definitely usually the first thing to travel. Our music and content is a lot more family friendly, going to be a lot less than the Ever After festival, but we have invested in that technology as well, which we should see help because we are, again, looking to create a long-term relationship with the city. So that's something that we've invested in, and we hope that it results in a positive reinforces. We looked at lots of different kind of angles of playing the stage, and just for safety and traffic flow, this ended up to be the best one. So we did do as much as we could to kind of limit that base, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessica and Tiffany. Those are all the questions we have, and again, appreciate your patience today. So this item has been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Is there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? So that's carried, and we'll come back to council in 1 week's time. So thank you very much for your patience. So moving back, and I appreciate the committees jumping around just to let those ladies go. Councillor Marsh, you have the floor with the Koi Music Fest.
Sure. So I just want to point out that despite the fact that there is a church and some vacant lots behind the church, there are, of course, some high-rise apartment buildings right beside Center in the Square on the other side of Queen Street. So I'm just wanting to make note of that and, hope that that the noise will not pose a problem to those residents. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zola, you had rang in last time. You ready, or no questions on the Koi Music Fest? That's okay.
In the past, and it had, because this is new for the Center in the Square.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I believe in the past this was part of the downtown special events that went and was held in the core. So this is the first time that it's been moved away from the core.
And we've ever had any problems with it?
I am not aware of us having any concerns with this specific music fest in the past.
Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the Ever After Festival, we did come up with the 65 dBA level, and in sort of conjunction with what Councillor Marsh is saying, are we okay that 65 dBA is enough for, is that going to be something that might be easily attained, being that it's so close to a residential area?
Through the chair, that has been expressed to the staff that have been working on this from Center in the Square and our concerns around being able to attain that 65 dBA. They are quite confident that they're going to be able to stick within those guidelines and have been more than willing to work with us should any issues arise around those levels. We will be doing sound testing on the Saturday morning as well, so we should be able to have a good idea of what the output will be.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. You don't even need to answer this right now, Ms. McNeil. I just noticed that the sound check is starting at 8 a.m. And I noticed the delegations aren't here, but if there's any way to push that back between now and council, I think for a lot of people there's a big difference between even 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. So just, if you could take that back, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Verbenovic.
Thank you. And this isn't as much a question on this issue as just an opportunity to acknowledge Gloria as our new permanent Director of Bylaw Enforcement and to publicly welcome her and congratulate her in that role.
Yes, welcome. We'll probably get to see you a lot more around here now, right? Permanently. Councillor Etherington.
Can I make a quick comment, Madam Chair?
Sure.
Promise, I'm hungry.
I am too, and we're running out of time for lunch. So.
No, I was just going to say, we live in a city, and because we live in a city, we expect a lot of festivals, we expect a lot of noise from music, which I enjoy as much as anyone. But I think we're rapidly approaching a saturation point. When we look back on earlier items on this agenda, 10 noise exemptions, 10 occasions when the School of Rock will be playing. We've got the Koi Festival now in a residential neighborhood. And I just wanted to point out, make council aware that I believe that people have a right to a little peace and quiet on the occasional weekend. This is non-stop for every summer weekend.
Councillor Marsh.
Just really quickly, I hope that if we approve this noise exemption as it's stated, that should staff go back and, be able to negotiate the stage placement being facing away from the residential neighborhood, that's not going to be a problem. So I just want to make note of that, I still think it would be better facing away from the residences.
Okay, thank you. That item's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis. I don't see any other comments. So those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. I just want to quickly thank committee. We are done. Oh, yep, we do have to go to special counsel. I just quickly want to thank committee for allowing us to shorten our timeframes today, considering some of the additional delegations that we had and understanding the circumstances and really trying hard to stick within that. So I appreciate your indulgence in trying to move committee along today. So with that, we have special counsel.